never met him.
We'll call the meeting to order. It's the regular assembly meeting, December 17th, 2018. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Kurt?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Brandy? Here. Jay?
Member Stanton Greger will be arriving 6 o'clock or so. He's at work. So, now it's time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance. Everybody please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there are no minutes on tonight's agenda for approval from previous meetings. That brings us to item 4, today's meeting agenda. Is there any amendments, or would we like to vote to approve the meeting as presented? Agenda. Member Lynn.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we take the project list and move that to the next meeting, since it doesn't have to be until the end of January.
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any discussion on that amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, you have that, Daniel? That will help us out immensely this evening. Member Nucci, did you have an amendment?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to remove item 17C from the agenda for some time later on in January.
Okay, is there a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, that's to remove the discussion item designated assembly seats for election purposes. I think we all got the email from the two people that proposed this, and they suggested that we move it to a different meeting as well. So, all those in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that passes too. Those are the two amendments. Any other amendments to tonight's meeting agenda? Okay, all those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move forward. Okay, next thing on the agenda tonight is public hearings, item 5. This is a public hearing on ordinance 2018-20, an ordinance amending section 3.08.120C of the municipal code entitled Assembly Meetings Agenda, to add the Pledge of Allegiance to the agenda and to change the agenda title of Visitors' Views to Persons to be Heard. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to participate in this public hearing? Okay, seeing none, that public hearing is closed. Bid awards. There are none listed on today's agenda. Is there any visitors with views related to items on today's agenda? Mr. Lynch, first, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. I'm Brian Lynch. I'm here representing Rivers Without Borders this evening. You have 15F on your agenda. It's a group sign-on letter to Governor Dunleavy regarding the Tulsa Chief Mine. We're trying to get a number of municipalities, gear groups, NGOs to sign on to this. It's just simply a letter to the new administration, letting them know the importance of making sure that BC keeps working on cleaning up the Tulsa Chief Mine, which has been leaking acid mine drainage for 6 decades. And we have just made some what we think are fairly significant inroads to convince BC to finally take the bull by the horns and actually clean it up themselves. We'll see. The devil's in the details, but we'll see what happens. But this letter is simply to let the administration know the value of the TACU and what is going on up there, and to keep the pressure on BC. It only addresses the Tulsa Chief. It doesn't address anything like financial assurances or enforceable regulations for the entire mining industry in BC. That's something that's far bigger than what this thing is going to deal with, and those are going to take a lot of time to work through. But anyway, so we're just interested in trying to get the mayors to sign off, or the borough to sign off on this thing, along with other organizations. The only other one we have committed to this so far, and we just started this effort, is the United Southeast Alaska Gill Letters, and they have agreed to sign on to it. So just to let you know. So.
All right, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Lynch?
Yeah, I have two, Brian. One's related to, why did you particularly stay with Tulsa Mine rather than to look at the 3 drainages in total?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assemblymember Lynn, it was to keep it, if you will, simple. Those other issues are much more broad. They're going to take a lot longer. This thing is an immediate issue that we have been working on. I believe every administration since Hickel has addressed DC concerning this issue. It is an ongoing pollution issue on the Taku, and we think that we have finally, like I said, convinced DC to actually shut down this thing and clean it up themselves rather than try to get a mining company to come in there and open the mine and clean it up. So this is just, it's just very Tosaquah Chief centric right now. Those other issues are going to have to be dealt with, and we will probably be having meetings with the administration and whatnot on those other issues also. But this is just addressing this only right now because it isn't a very immediate issue. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
thank you.
And saw another hand come up.
I'm Bob Martin. Here a little bit for the Harbor Board, but we haven't met for about 10 months, so I'm also just here for myself. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the land swap and the harbor maintenance shop possibilities there in the Petro property. And I just wanted to go back a little bit. We first looked at this in 2015, and looked like a good idea, but there's some financial implications to it. So we said, great, it looks good. We kind of punted it to you guys, and I don't know if anything happened. I don't know what happened. But anyway, then a few years later, it's up again. And once again, the Harbor Board said, it looks great. I think sometimes people don't realize there's a real need for maintenance work in the harbor. They kind of see they're working out of a little garage-sized building, and that's the way it's always been. But I've kind of I'll check in with Glow once in a while, and I'll kind of ask, what are the guys doing? Because I'm kind of curious too. What do those guys do? And usually it's a real job that needs to get done. Sometimes it's a job that can be put off for years, and I don't think that really saves us any money, though. Some of these things could be pushed off maybe indefinitely until the harbor needs replacing. So I think there's a real need there. They can't get a lot of their work done very efficiently with the way their supplies are spread out. Most of these jobs involve specialized equipment, specialized supplies. A lot of times, I think they spend a lot of time rounding stuff up, doing a little bit of work, and then putting stuff away till the next day, or waiting for weather. And so, long term, I think some of the costs will be offset by the productivity of the workforce. If you think about 2 staff members working full-time year after year, that adds up to a lot of money too. So I think it's time to either put forth alternatives. There have been some alternatives suggested to the Petro land swap, but usually they're not fleshed out very well. And I feel like we're not comparing apples to apples. So I just think it's time to put those alternatives up and discuss them. And I guess that's about everything I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Any other people in the audience that have issues with the views, related to views on today's agenda?
Can I? Okay. I just am here going to speak towards the Petro thing. First of all, though, I know this is unrelated, but I just wanted to really show my appreciation and thank all of you for your support to the Parks and Rec and the Breakfast with Santa. It was awesome, and they do a fabulous job, so shout out to Chandra and her crew for that. But I'm mainly here because 5 o'clock is really hard to find a babysitter, so I have Tamara babysitting Sigrid, so I can speak right now rather than waiting until we get to that part of the agenda. Just to reiterate what Bob says, we have been working, if you remember, we took over ownership of the harbor facilities in 2006, and for the listening public, that includes the harbors as well as all the associated port docks and crane docks and launch ramps and skiff floats and utility floats and fish cleaning floats and bathrooms and parking lots lots, and all of the things that go into servicing one of your biggest assets here in the harbor, in the community. And so we desperately need a facility. We've been talking about this since 2006, and since really 2015, been really looking for a place and running it past you. And so the Petro project was put forth, like Bob said, in 2015. The professionals vetted it with the public. Over almost 3 years ago now, it became part of the Waterfront Master Plan as a good suggested site. And so I just really implore anybody that doesn't like this idea to bring forth another idea so we can look at it and vet it. Before you send a letter to the editor or whatever, please come and talk to us about it, and we'll go through it. And if there's a better idea out there, we will embrace it. But so far, we really haven't had anything. And then finally, I'd just like to end with, so as part of that 5-page memo that I think you've seen a couple of times in your packet, the harbor has maintained that we're going to spend probably $20,000 to get the building up and running, and possibly another $40,000 in the next 5 years. So I don't know where the $200,000 came from, but it's now been on the front page and it's getting vetted in letters to the editor. So this is what I'm going to just pass this out to you, so you have this to talk about when you debate later tonight. So thank you.
Is there any other visitors in the audience tonight with views related to items on today's agenda? Did you want to speak to something on the agenda, Harvey?
Up to visitors' views unrelated to agenda.
Unrelated? Okay. All right. So is there any other visitors with views related to items on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, visitors' views unrelated to items on today's agenda.
First of all, I wish I brought a better hearing system because I can't hardly hear you folks at all. It seems like there needs to be a speaker or something, a loudspeaker. But anyhow, I'm here at the risk of friends and others thinking less of me. I've been taking advantage of the senior sales tax exemption. My costs have increased significantly over the last year or so, and I try to cut corners. My property tax continues to be a pretty big hit once a year to contribute to the town's operation. Back when the cost of administration to turn out one of these cards was said to be $50 or $60, I visited with the finance director and suggested that maybe there's not a need to renew the thing every year. And I don't recall if I came to talk to you folks or not, but anyway, I think that's still a bad thing to do. It's now going to have the town receive kind of an advance sales tax revenue of, if there's, say, 600 seniors, there's been a bunch of numbers battered around, but if there were 600 seniors, then the town's going to have an advance tax revenue of $60,000 at the first of the year, which is a pretty big income. Maybe that's the reason why the idea of making the new cards cost $100 each instead of $50 or $60, which was the original cost of turning them out. Having the things expire to me is a big criticism. I have a Veteran Administration card that never expires. I have a Medicare card that never expires. I have a humble Alaska fishing, hunting, trapping license that never expires. Nobody could ever use those things when I kicked the bucket. They couldn't use my senior sales tax exemption card if I kicked the bucket either. It's got my picture on it, it's got my name. I think it's really ludicrous for the town to do that, to renew the things every year. It doesn't make a bit of sense to me. even if it did cost $100 to do the things, to make the things, and that's one thing, but why take the time and effort to do it? Just turn the things out and let them expire whenever. I guess that's all I have to say. I really wish you'd consider eliminating that need to renew the things. So
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Gillen. That's something we can definitely take under consideration in the future. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
It just doesn't seem to be a reason for it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your coming and giving your testimony.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, I've got a little pickle in my throat here. Is there any other visitors in the audience with views unrelated to items on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to board, commission, and committee reports. There's nothing listed under that item. Consent agenda, there's one item under that, item 10, 18-405, Ingalls Galley 2019-20 liquor license renewal. I'd entertain a motion to approve this item on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Beachy, I believe, and seconded by Member Borough. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Sure.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, report of other officers, item 11. That brings us to item A, which is 18-406. This is a report from Public Works Director Cotta. So,
good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Cotta, Public Works Director, and I'm here to give everyone an update on the solid waste baler. Since my last report to the Assembly on November 5th regarding the status of the solid waste baler, there have been some important developments. The manager has asked me to provide an update on these developments for the Assembly and the public. First, an update on baler operations. After approximately 9 weeks of downtime, we got our new wire tie unit installed and operational on Thursday, December 6th. Our crew immediately set to work baling the backlog of garbage and recyclables on the baler floor. After we had operated for approximately 12 hours of runtime and baled a little over 20,000 pounds of garbage and recyclables, the conveyor broke down on Friday, December 7th. Upon examining the failed hardware on the conveyor belt, due to the pattern of the failures, it was apparent to us that the conveyor structure was failing and was not going to be serviceable much longer. Since we still had a backlog of stockpiled materials on the baler floor, we decided to attempt some additional repairs to see if we could operate long enough to get caught up. These repairs were made, and by Sunday we attempted to start up again. This was not successful. Once I was notified on Sunday of the unsuccessful startup, we made the decision to forego any further attempts to repair the conveyor and instead focus on making some modifications to the baler to allow us to load the hopper with a front-end loader instead of using the conveyor for this function. The sanitation crew, assisted by the streets department, stepped up to the challenge, and by Tuesday, December 11th, had the hopper modifications mostly done, with a test bale completed on Tuesday afternoon. Baling operations resumed on Wednesday, December 12th. And I'm happy to report that as of today, we have cleared all the material off baler floor, and we're caught up. So, kudos to the crew. They did an awesome job. Like I say, they stepped up to the challenge and got it done. So I'm very happy about that. We intend to start demolition of the old conveyor once the baler floor is clear, which should be within a few days. Well, yeah, it's today. This will save us some money by doing some demolition work in-house, and will also give us an opportunity to evaluate the conveyor pit and adjacent areas of the building well prior to replacement of the baler next spring. In conjunction with wire tie replacement and subsequent repairs, we've been looking at the sanitation department's finances to determine how to fund the baler replacement project without having to borrow money to do this. Because of good fiscal management over the past several years, adequate funds are available to support baler replacement while still maintaining some reserves and avoiding any immediate increase in solid waste rates. A supplemental budget proposal has been submitted to the Assembly for consideration at this meeting, which outlines the sources of funding proposed for the baler replacement project. If the Assembly approves the supplemental budget once it is finalized on the third reading on or about January 21st, 2019, Public Works will advertise for proposals shortly thereafter. The solicitation period is normally 30 days, followed by evaluation of submitted proposals and award recommendation, protest period, etc. Project award will likely be the first or second meeting in March, with construction to begin as soon thereafter as practicable, hopefully in April. Because the replacement project will significantly draw down the department's financial reserves, it is further proposed that we budget for a rate study in the next fiscal year to determine if rate increases are required to support the future needs of the sanitation department. An estimated budget for the rate study will be included in the sanitation department's FY20 budget proposal. At this point, I think it is important to note that while we have had significant challenges keeping the solid waste boiler running, that services to the public have largely not been affected. Garbage and recyclables have been collected on schedule, and the landfill has remained open. The mechanical issues have been tough on our staff, but they have met these challenges and continued to provide the timely service that the people of Petersburg have come to expect. And we intend to stay focused on our primary mission to keep solid waste services running reliably while we move forward with full replacement of the solid waste baler. And at this point, I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys may have. Thank you.
Any Assembly members have questions of Public Works Director Cotter? Member Lynn?
I thought on our last presentation, Chris, that you were going to explore different kind of facilities or different kind of hardware that we might put in there. Did I miss something before and then we were going to go ahead and advertise after we?
Different types of hardware.
Well, a different type, when I say different type of a baler or different way of doing business there?
I'm not sure I'm following you there. I mean, we've looked at other ways to do this, but really baling is the only, it's really the only option as a cost-effective means to get waste out of the area and down south. I mean, if we're talking about looking into a landfill or an incinerator or something like that, I mean, those numbers don't add.
I'm asking the question incorrectly. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying the conveyor, I thought you were going to go ahead and advertise and look at the costs of it and some different options along those lines of what you might want to do before we came back and we allocated the funds. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe I missed it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I don't recall that. If I gave you that impression, I've been asking questions, of course, process questions. We've been taking a close look at what we do there and how we could do it more efficiently with a new machine, how we might be able to save money by not replacing just in kind, but looking at other options, different ways of operating, different configurations. But, we're going to continue doing that. I wanted to get the supplemental budget forward and get the process started because, we want to get that in place. The sooner we get that in place, the sooner we can advertise and, and get our project done. So we are continuing to look for, efficiencies and keeping our minds open as far as what the final product is going to look like.
Thank you.
Member Walter and then Member Mucci.
So you guys built a hopper for this. Do you see any advantage to putting the conveyor back in? Seems like the hopper, you got fewer moving parts. You got a front end loader. You may have to build a bay.
Right.
People can throw the trash in so you don't have to chase that garbage around up there. And so you're going to run this until April? Is this process through April? So what other things do you see going wrong? I know you guys talked about it one time, the electrical was kind of subpar compared to what the newer stuff is. So how much is that's related to the conveyor? How much is that related to the bander? So just
the weakest links in the system have have failed and been replaced or eliminated at this point. The conveyor was probably the worst one. The wire tie, was right there with it. The wire tie happened to just fail to the point where it wasn't economical to even try to make it run anymore. And so we've eliminated the conveyor at this point, although it's less efficient for us to load with a front end loader. You say it's less moving parts. Well, that's true, I guess, as far as the conveyor goes, but then now you're using your loader a lot more. So you're going to cause more wear and tear on that machine. It's also a slower process than a conveyor, so you lose efficiency too. The control system, we've basically rigged that up as an analog control system. We feel like that'll serve until we replace the thing. We got a new wire tie, so that won't have to be replaced. We're going to reuse that. We've already talked to the folks that make this equipment, and it's one of the standard units that are used all over the country, so we can reuse that portion of it. So the machine is still really old, and the linings, I think last time I talked to the assembly, I was talking about the linings inside. Those are getting pretty thin, but if we have a problem there, we can probably re-weld something and get some more time out of it. But the biggest problem was that conveyor, and that's out of the picture for now. So.
Member Mucci, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report, Chris. I appreciate it. I'm just trying to, follow up on Assemblymember Lynn's question. Bob, were you thinking, or was the conversation about if Chris was going to look into different technology or different type of equipment, or I'm just trying to follow that?
Different technology and different type of equipment.
Okay.
And Manager Giesbrecht, you?
I just wanted to, the reason the supplemental budget's important is we really can't go out for RFPs unless we have funds allocated by the Assembly to proceed with a project like that. So it's hard to get estimates, in a sense, that are binding until we put out an RFP and say, hey, give us this information in kind of an open forum. That then would come back to the Assembly before any kind of award would be done. So I was following up on Assemblymember Lynn's question about, we've gotten estimates but they're not binding. Basically, Chris talks to these people and said, what does this thing cost? And they give you ranges. We need it to be a lot more specific than that. And the RFP will do that. It's basically saying, here's the detail of what we need in our operation. Now you tell us what it's going to cost and what you can provide. And we don't really want to go through that process and look like we're being unfair if we don't have money set aside for doing the project to begin with. So that's why the whole supplemental budget process is we want to make sure the Assembly, because if the Assembly doesn't approve that, then we really can't go out for RFPs, is what it amounts to. We don't have the money to do it.
Member Lynn, you had another comment?
That was where my question was really headed, is that if you're going to put out that RFP, are we going to look at different types of techniques, different technologies, et cetera? That was where I was going with it.
Well, some of the parameters in an RFP can be broader than a bid process, because when you go out to bid, you're speccing out a type of equipment, you're speccing out, everything in great detail as far as what you want the job to do, what you want the process to do. With an RFP, you have a little more latitude. You can say, this is what we need to do. This is how many tons of garbage we go through. This is how we want to, basically, we want to bail. We want an efficient process. How are you guys going to get us there? What do you propose? So there's room for, I guess, some creativity on our part, but also on the part of the contractors that we're soliciting to, what can you offer that's maybe an out-of-the-box solution that's a less expensive solution than a traditional machine. So,
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Chris, for your report, and we'll address the supplemental budget request later in the meeting. Next item under report of other officers is 18407, Clausen Museum end of season report. So I think the director of the museum is here to give a report.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Assembly members. I'm going to just sit. Okay, so my name's Lizzie Walsh, and I'm the director of the Clausen Memorial Museum. And I'm here to share with the Assembly my end of season report on the museum. And I'd like to start off with some figures about who visited our museum in 2018. So the total number of visitors for 2018 through November was 4,565. We had 1,006 visitors from the cruise ships, 653 visitors that were non-residents, and these are tourists that come off the state ferry, individuals that are just traveling on their own, and visitors that come off of privately owned boats and smaller cruise ships. The remaining 1,572 visitors to the museum were made up of museum members, residents of Petersburg that are not members, PFI workers, and student visitors. In 2018, our museum was closed for 3 months. However, during the 9 months of operation, our museum hosted a total of 14 special events, actually 15, including our annual open house, which was yesterday. The first event of 2018 was a really cool exhibit done by our assistant curator, Ann Lee, called Winter's Past. And this is an exhibit showcased winter activities of the early residents of Petersburg. It had objects like skis, snowshoes, and old photos. Our next show was held at the beginning of April, and it was a partnership with the Good Beginnings Preschool, and it was an art show fundraiser for the preschool. We hosted later in April a solo show by Lisa Schrammick. We hosted our annual Little Norway art show, which is always very popular. It's community-driven. Anyone can submit art, and it's always really fun to see who comes out with some art for that. Our next special event was an exhibit of paintings that were discovered in our collection that we had not known about before, done by a mysterious man named F.M. Harrow, and it was this kind of fun, engaging way to get the community involved in this kind of mystery hunt of who was F.M. Harrow. It was a lot of fun. Our next event was a solo show by Polly Lee of her ceramic work. It's a kind of retrospective of works that she'd done through her life, and it was really beautiful to see. That was followed by a show called August Harvest, and this was a special exhibit that we drew from our collection of archival photos, and it highlighted the agricultural endeavors and largely successes of Petersburg's early pioneers. And it was a lot of fun. It was really cool to get some older folks in and identify people in the photos that we hadn't had names for previously, and it was really fun and a great way to engage with the community. We co-hosted with the Rainforest Festival the annual Annabelle Baker Memorial Show in September, and that was followed by another solo show by Ashley Lohr. And in October, we also held our first open mic at the museum. And this was a partnership with the Petersburg Arts Council to help raise some money for the council and just to provide an opportunity for community members to come out and listen to some music or play some music in a very kind of low-key, non-judgmental environment. And it was a lot of fun. They had a little bake sale, and it was kid-friendly, and yeah, it was great. Let's see. We also, in October, we also hosted a student-driven show, Rememory, and it was with artworks from the elementary school and from the high school, kind of looking at kind of Halloween-themed. It was really cool. In November, we co-hosted with the library the visiting exhibit, Decolonizing Alaska, and that was a really beautiful, very powerful show. I got a lot of great feedback from community members who came to the show. And actually, I'd like to draw your attention to an ongoing effort by community members to purchase one of the pieces from this show to be displayed for our community, actually in the borough offices. So far, the community member has raised $24,000, and they're in the process of raising the additional $11,000. And if you're interested in donating, you can go and look at the piece of art, which is on display through the end of December at our public library. It's really gorgeous. It's the bench. If you have been to the show, it's the bench with the salmon that was done. It's kind of a group effort. I think Ray Troll did some of the paintings. Dolores Churchill did some of the details with the deer hoofs. It's really gorgeous. If you haven't had a chance to see it, I suggest you go and look at it at the library. So currently on display at the museum is works from Shift, which is the Women's Invitational Art Show, and they'll be on display through the 21st. If you hadn't had a chance to see them, come up to the museum. We're open 1 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Saturday from 12 to 5. And it's a really beautiful show as well. 13, I believe, different artists participated in the show, all creating art under the theme of shift, and they have multiple different interpretations, and it was really great. Now, I've included in your package tonight an application to become a museum member. And I just thought that I would break down some of our membership numbers. We have currently 296 members, and of these, 240 are renewing members, 50 are new members, and we have 6 business members. Our membership is incredibly important to the museum, of course. They support us, and we're able to provide engaging and fun activities for them because of their support. And so, as you enter into your discussions about the budget, I know that the final decision is a long way off, but there has been some talk about the budget. I would ask the Assembly members to consider, in particular, besides my report, the infographic that I also included in your package. It shows the kind of economic aspect. I've discussed the positive impact that our museum can have on the quality of life, but it also has an impact directly and indirectly on the economy of our community. And our community is actively engaged in our museum, and I look forward to growing that engagement in the coming year. So, thank you.
All right, thank you for your report. Is there any questions? All right, thanks. If I can find my way back to the agenda here. Okay, next item on the agenda is the mayor's report. Very short. This meeting is just Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Myself and the Assembly wish all the Petersburg Borough residents and visitors a Merry Christmas and a healthy and prosperous 2019. We have much to be thankful for in our small community. So that brings us to the manager's report. See if you could beat that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to the Petersburg pilot, my report is actually going to be published in the newspaper with the length of this meeting. And at the end of the year, I always do a kind of a little different thing and ask each of the department heads to give me a list of one thing they're very thankful for, work-related, and one thing they're very proud of. So that's the list. If you are very interested in seeing that, it'll be in the pilot this week, I've been told. So.
That's also on our website underneath the agenda. So.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, Steve. That brings us to the next item, and that's unfinished business. Ordinances for third and final reading. Ordinance 2018-18, that ordinance amending the Petersburg Municipal Code by repealing Titles 18 subdivision and 19 zoning and adopting a new borough development code. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved. Second.
That Member Rucci made the motion and seconded by Member Lynn. So that brings us to discussion, and now we will address, I think this is the way we were intending to do this, all of the requested amendments and go over them one at a time. Is that what you proposed, Liz? So we need a motion for each one of these amendments, and then we'll address each one individually and keep tally on what our decision is. I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 1, which is require a building notification form be submitted for construction outside of service area 1. Proposed by the finance director, and staff recommendation is yes. So I'd entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Norheim. Any discussion on this amendment 1? And then if anybody needs any clarification, Liz is here to answer questions. Okay, no discussion. Will clerk call the roll? I think we may as well do them all by roll call.
Okay. Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Me?
Oh.
Was that next?
Sorry about that. Mark?
No. Okay, so that passes with a 4-2. Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 2, delete reference to stories in regard to maximum building height. Staff, public question. Anyway, I'd entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion. So this was proposed by the staff. Is there an explanation, Liz? Is it just for make it easier to understand, or?
Exactly. Somebody asked me the question, and they made a really good point that why do we need stories if we just have height already in there? It just is confusing to the public when they're reading it, which I agreed, so might as well make it less confusing.
Okay. Any discussion, Mr. Lynn?
Just a question. Does this also relate to our ability to fight fires at that height, or was that just for clarification purposes?
It's really the fire part of it. That's what the maximum height is set for. So our maximum height is based on the capacity of our firefighting equipment. So then having stories in there, it really doesn't lend itself, doesn't provide any more information or help us in any way. It really comes down to that height, that height reading. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, amendment 2 passes unanimously with a 6-0 vote. Amendment number 3, I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 3, which is limit encroachment into setback to within 5 feet of property line, and that was proposed by the staff.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made by Member Lynn. Was that Member Mucci?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Discussion. Could you give a quick just clarification on this, Liz?
Generally, we require a certain distance between buildings and structures, but then we also allow sheds and eaves and things like that to extend a little bit into those setbacks. So this sets a hard line where we're not going to allow eaves or sheds or playground equipment, things like that, closer than 5 feet from the property line. So we always have 10 feet in between all structures, and that's primarily fire separation. To make sure they can move equipment and put up ladders and things like that, and have a clear line in between any kind of houses and structures, things like that.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies me. Member Walhooter?
Yeah, Liz, does that also pertain to fences?
No, a fence can be on the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll on amendment number 3.
Okay. Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, amendment number 3 passes unanimously. The next item, amendment 4, is delete size limit of caretaker dwelling, and that was proposed by Jim Whitethorn. Staff recommendation is none, but I'd entertain a motion to approve this amendment.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Burrell. So, Member Mucci, comment.
Sure. But under staff recommendation, it says here, do not approve.
Pardon me?
It does.
Did staff have a recommendation? The staff recommendation on my list says no. Does that no mean not to approve this amendment, or?
Correct.
Okay. And if, from looking at it, Liz, so it went from 600 to 750 square feet?
The Planning Commission amended it from 600 to 750.
Right. So
And so
that's
they
where
went-
we're at now is 750.
So you're at 750 now, right?
Any discussion, Member Lynn?
You know, just puzzling me over, the motion then was to, I'm puzzling over that.
You have to make a motion positive, so it's to support the amendment.
Yeah, to switch the, I move that we maintain the 750 square feet that Planning Commission's recommended. I think that's where I was.
Okay, if correct
Is that,
me.
did I screw that up? Or?
Debbie, if I'm correct, the way we're proceeding with this particular amendment, if we vote no, it goes to 750.
Correct.
If we vote yes, then it goes to no limit.
No limit.
The proposal.
Correct.
Okay. So, Member Merle.
Oh, did you make the amendment right?
I was moving that we move it to 750 as recommended by the Planning Commission. That was my motion that I'd just put on the table. Same as, but you asked a different question. And I'm okay with where you were at. I withdraw my motion.
Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. So we're on the same page. If we vote no, then it's 750. If we vote yes, it's unlimited. Member Merle.
Can I make an amendment to increase it to 1,200 square feet?
Is there a second to that amendment?
I mean, I'll second it, just to talk about it.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Merle, seconded by Member Norheim to change it from unlimited to 1,200 square feet. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Member Merle.
Well, I actually have a piece of property which this kind of affects if anyone was to buy it from me, so that's probably why I have an interest in this. But I just think 750 square feet is really small. If you put a couple in there to be a caretaker of a dwelling, 1,200 square feet's a reasonable, comfortable space, but 750, it's a little cramped. And that's why I think that it should be increased.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment to reduce it from unlimited to 1,200?
I guess my question would be then, this is a caretaker dwelling, not meant to be a permanent residence, right?
I think, Liz, can you explain it? It's caretaker dwelling on industrial property? Mm-hmm. Isn't this just apply to industrial property?
Right, it's a caretaker dwelling on industrial property only. So it's supposed to be, you have an established industrial use, and then you need someone to watch over whatever that industrial use is, like equipment or something like that. And so you allow for some residential use, which is a caretaker dwelling.
In kind of like an off-season type thing?
Exactly, like someone, if you wanted someone to watch over Ocean Beauty or something, or, on the off-season.
Okay, so any other discussion on it, Member Merle?
Well, from my views on it, there's a lot of, like Hungerford Hill, there's other properties that currently have residential places on it. So to sell it, you're going to be, you're kind of limiting your options for anybody that was zoned industrial, which was kind of left open prior to this. And so you're taking away your value of our property. And if, say, I have a property right now that's industrial, has 2 residences on it, someone wanted to buy that, purchase it, and put in a big warehouse, then they're really limited to what they can do with it. And whereas prior to this, it wasn't as limited, from what I understand.
Liz, did you have clarification?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying in terms of if someone already has residential on an industrial lot, this doesn't take away their option to, those residences still stay on that lot, and if those residences are somehow destroyed, they're allowed to rebuild those residences as is, and it doesn't change their ability to build a warehouse, which, having the size on the caretaker doesn't affect your ability to do a warehouse at all. Just to clarify on that side of it.
Member Mucci, do you want to address this? I thought you had your hand up. Okay, so
Can I just ask one
clarification
question?
from Liz again?
Yeah. So then, say if something was to happen, you can rebuild to that same size, but say you didn't want to rebuild and you wanted to build a warehouse and put, you know, like a small efficiency apartment above that. Are you no longer allowed to do that because now...
Well, no, you could build a warehouse with a 750 square foot apartment in it.
Right, but then, like I said, so like I had a fire, but I wanted a warehouse with 1,200 square feet, and I have currently a residential property. I have to follow these new guidelines, is what I'm saying?
No, if you have a fire and you have a 1,200 square foot residence, you can rebuild a 1,200 square foot residence.
But I can't build a warehouse with a 1,200 square foot.
Yeah, you could still build a warehouse and a 1,200 square foot residence.
If there's
If
previously a
it's
resident.
destroyed and you have a 1,200 square foot residence, let's say you have a 1,200 square foot residence and you have a warehouse underneath, it gets destroyed, you can rebuild the house the same size as you had it before and also build a warehouse. I guess I'm not...
I guess what I'm saying is I have 2 residences on a lot that's industrial with no warehouse, but if it was to get destroyed, I can't rebuild something different, like a warehouse with an apartment, even though I currently had a residence of that size?
You can rebuild a residence the same size. If it gets destroyed on that industrial lot, you can rebuild the residence the same size.
But could she put it on top of a warehouse?
It's the same size, as long as it's the same size, that's what we're talking about. So if you have a 1,200 square foot residence, you can rebuild a 1,200 square foot residence.
And
It's
incorporate, I think the
And then there's the warehouse, you really are unlimited on the warehouse side of it. You know, that's why it's industrial property, so you could cover the entire property with a warehouse if you wanted to. We're not going to limit the size of the warehouse.
But if the person was to have a piece of residential property that had or industrial property that had a residence on it, and it was destroyed by fire, can they replace that with a warehouse, then with the caretaker's dwelling in it, over 750 square feet? Can they go up to the size that their former residence was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was the clarification we were looking for. Member Walhooter?
As long as that use is maintained, you know, you have that residence, it gets destroyed, and then you're rebuilding that same square foot size. You can.
Mr. Walhooter.
Thanks. This is to Liz. Hey, Liz, was the original ordinance only 600 foot?
It was 6 or 650, one of those two.
That was the original. That's
That
what
was the
we
original.
had when we were still a city of Petersburg.
Oh,
Now
no.
it's
No.
When the original, like what currently is in place now,
Yeah.
currently in place, there is no size limit.
Okay.
The original, when original that went to the Planning Commission, the size was, I think it was 6 or 650, I can't remember. And the Planning Commission raised it to 750. But currently, there is no size limit.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this? You know, my personal opinion on this is I'd like to see it a little larger than 750 square feet. I can't make a motion. If I could, I would make a motion to have it somewhere in 1,000 square foot range, something a little bit bigger. But, 1,200 might be too big, but with that being said, I think I will support this recommendation from Mr. Whitethorn. So, anyway, any other discussion on amendment, I believe, number 4?
Mr. Chairman?
Member Bucci?
Just a point of clarification here. So right now, we're going to just be voting on the amendment to...
Correct, you're right.
To amendment number 4.
The 1,200 square foot amendment. And then we're going to go back to amendment number 4.
Thank you.
So now we're voting, like Member Bucci mentioned, we're going to be voting on the amendment from unlimited to 1,200 square feet. So will the clerk call the roll?
Jeff?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Kurt?
Nope.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, so the amendment fails on a tie vote. So that brings us to the original motion, which is to delete size limit of a caretaker dwelling. And that's
Mr. Mayor.
Member Walhooter.
Thank you. I would like to make an amendment to this to make it to 1,000 square feet.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Sure.
Well, there was a second. Motion been made by Member Walhitter, seconded by Member Morrell to reduce it from unlimited to 1,000 square feet. Any discussion? Senator has already discussed this, so will the clerk call the roll on the amendment to change it from unlimited to 1,000 square feet?
Okay. Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Randy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Okay, so that amendment passes with a 4-2 vote, if my numbers are right, Danielle?
Yep.
Okay, so if there's no other amendments, that brings us to the motion as amended for amendment number 4 to change the size from unlimited, or to delete the size limit to 1,000 square feet, sorry. Any discussion on the main motion as amended? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just I guess a question for Liz. How does this affect this amendment?
It's 250 square feet.
I understand that.
Okay, let's keep.
It's enforceable. That's, at this point, that's really what we're looking at. I mean, it's a solid number. We can enforce it on the building permit side of things. So, it's really community desire. I'm not sure that the motions that you're making are exactly right, but I think I understand that what you're voting on is changing this to 1,000 square feet. Right? So we're not deleting this last sentence. We're actually just changing the 750 to 1,000, right?
Correct. We're not voting to approve unlimited size. We're voting to change 750 to 1,000.
Yeah, okay.
So, are we all on the same page before we vote? Member Waller.
So just for clarification, so if we vote no on limiting the caretaker dweller, then we're approving the 1,000 square feet.
Clerk, what's your clarification on that? Just so we do it right, so we don't have to come revisit it.
So you have passed the amendment that it's going to be 1,000. So yes, if it fails as amended, you're right, Kurt. Then you're deleting the maximum size. Correct?
If we vote as amended to make it 1,000 square feet, in my mind.
If it passes, then it's 1,000 square feet. If it fails, then you're deleting the maximum size for the caretaker dwelling, which was the original.
So vote yes makes it 1,000 square feet. Vote no makes it 750.
Correct.
Okay. Member Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we do change this to 1,000 square feet and it passes, then we go back to the main motion, and the staff recommendation is to not approve it.
We're voting on the main motion as amended.
Okay, so 1,000 square feet, but the staff recommendation is to not approve it. Am I reading that right?
Their recommendation is to not approve unlimited size, which it currently is now in the city's old zoning.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding. Liz is shaking her head just for the people that are baffled in the radio audience. So, any other discussion? So the Assembly is aware of what a yes vote means. It makes it 1,000 square feet, and a no vote keeps it at 750.
Unlimited.
Or
No, unlimited.
Right.
No means
no.
No, okay, gotcha. Okay, so I was confused still. All right, so yes means 1,000, no means unlimited. Okay, clerk call the roll.
Okay. Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
No.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, so amendment number 4, as amended, is 1,000 square feet with a 5-1 vote. Looks like a tongue twister.
Oh, that was the hardest one.
Okay, that brings us to amendment number 5. Clarify caretaker dwelling per parcel or business entity. This was proposed by Tora Benson. Staff recommendation is yes. I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 5 to the code.
Moment.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Borough, seconded by Member Walhooter. Any discussion? Member Borough.
This is just a question. This was just a language thing, right?
I believe so. Liz, can you explain it? That's what I've read, so, in the clarification. So if there's no other discussion, will the clerk call a roll on amendment number 5?
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, amendment number 5 passes with a 6-0 vote, unanimous vote. Amendment number 6, adjust maximum size of accessory structures so size limit increases as lot size increases. This was proposed by the Planning Commission, and staff recommendation is yes. So I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 6.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made by Member Much, I believe, and seconded by Member Lim. So, any discussion? Liz, so this is just allowing, and I can't remember the size of the lots. I guess it's on page 13 here if I look. Bear with me real quick. The larger your lot size gets, the bigger of your accessory building can be built.
Exactly. It's a bigger percentage of your lot.
And this is zoning wide? This is, or is this industrial? Or is
It's
it
in all residential districts.
all residential only? So okay.
In commercial and industrial, you don't have these limits.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Amendment number 6 passes unanimously. That brings us to amendment number 7, establish minimum standards for use of container vans in residential districts. This was proposed by Dave Ellis, and the staff recommendation is yes. Entertain a motion to approve amendment number 7.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lim on amendment number 7. Can you give a brief, just summarize this for us, please, Liz?
Sure. We all know container vans make pretty quick and inexpensive storage, but they tend to be fairly unattractive, especially in residential neighborhoods. And Mr. Ellis suggests that without too much cost or effort, they could be made to fit in better in a residential neighborhood. And he's just recommending that if someone's going to put a container in their yard, that they put some siding up on it and at least make it look like it's a shed or something, so that it's not standing out so much and not so unattractive.
And so if they did put one on a piece of residential property and put the adequate siding up, then it would be allowed?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Taylor?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, amendment number 7 to the code passes with a 5-1 vote, with Member Norheim voting no. And brings us to amendment number 8. And delete, and this one is, delete on commercial sales in market gardens in non-residential districts. And this was proposed by Farragut Farms, and the staff recommends yes. Entertain a motion to approve amendment 8.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made by Member Walhooter, Member Mucci, and seconded by Member Lim. So, any discussion on amendment number 8? Clerk call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes, okay, amendment number 8 passes unanimously. Next amendment is amendment number 9. Allow up to 10,000 square feet market gardens in all residential districts. And this was proposed by Farragut Farms and Mary Kopus. Is that the right production? I entertain a motion to approve amendment 9. No motion to approve? Amendment fails. Lack of a motion. Okay, amendment number 10. Clarify food production is allowed as a home occupation. It was proposed by the staff, and recommendation by the staff is yes. I'd entertain a motion to approve Amendment 10.
Second.
Motion was made by Member Borough, seconded by Member Lynn, I believe. Discussion. And what this just means, Liz, that you could sell, do food production is allowed as a home occupation, but it's limited to the hours of use and hours of just like the basic home business occupation?
Right. The way it was written originally, it wasn't exactly clear whether you could have food production as a home occupation. So this just says, yes, it's allowed as a home occupation. It is limited in size. Probably the only way it would really work well for someone is if they grew food on their property but then sold it somewhere else. Just because home occupation doesn't really allow for a lot of, a good retail use. You don't want a bunch of people showing up at somebody's yard to buy. So really for food occupation in particular, growing it and then selling it somewhere else is probably the only way it would work out okay. But you would be allowed to grow it for sale.
Any questions on this amendment? Okay, clerk call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Now we're on to amendment number 11. And this amendment is to allow net sheds as a primary use in historic district overlay. Entertain a motion to approve amendment 11.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morrell to approve amendment 11. Discussion. Member Lynn?
Just a question. What was the rationale behind allowing it? What was the thinking, Liz?
So the overlay, it has commercial districts and residential districts, and a net shed isn't going to be allowed, for instance, as a standalone use on a residential district or in the downtown commercial district, because we really don't want our valuable downtown commercial land to be used for just storage. You want it to be used for a business reason, for retail or something like that. But since that is such a recognized historic use on Singley Alley and on Hammer Slough, I wanted to make sure that if someone just had a piece of property that was vacant, they could rebuild a net shed if they wanted to, just to keep it in line with how it's always been used. So.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions on this amendment? I believe we're on amendment 11. I'm just reading over it really quick. So what we're talking about, just clarification for the audience, is Singley Alley and Hammer Slough, basically, just so people know what we're talking about if they're listening in. Okay, clerk call the roll on amendment 11.
Brandy?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Amendment number 11 passes unanimously. That brings us to amendment number 12, and this allow maximum of 6-foot fence in all districts. This was proposed by Jim Whitethorn. Staff has no recommendation on this. I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 12.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Morrell, seconded by Member Lim. Any discussion? And just clarification, Liz, for the listening public on this fence height. In residential areas, you could have a fence 6 feet high on the property line as long as it doesn't obstruct sight distance from driveways and road surfaces. Is that?
Do you mean currently? Or?
Currently, or this proposal is told, what is the limit now?
Currently it's 6 feet, and there's no requirements that you push back for sight or anything like that.
But with this one, there is a pushback for sight distance, isn't there, correct?
Yeah. But I guess I would note that if you do this, we had proposed 8-foot maximum for industrial and commercial, and it would lower it to 6 feet. So.
Okay, I didn't hear that. I don't know if the speakers...
I'm sorry. That if you, I guess I would note that if you approve this, Amendment 12, the proposed code allows for 8-foot high fences in industrial and commercial land, and you would lower it for those because you're saying 6 feet for all districts. That's his proposed amendment.
So this actually restricts
It would lower
fence height in industrial and commercial property areas.
Because
Interesting.
he said 6 feet for all districts, so.
Member Lynn?
One of the concerns that we talked about, Liz, was on a piece of corner property. If I owned it, I would want to fence out as far as I can. We talked about putting diagonals, and what I gathered from that is if we came forward, that would be a consideration, as long as you had the sight distance.
Right, so that's actually Amendment 13.
Yeah. Okay, that's the next amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's two there that have to do with fence height. And the first one is just 6 feet for everything across the board. And then the second one is 6 feet for residential, which is what we have now, except we put in the sight diagonals, on corners and driveways, and then 8 feet for industrial. So you could go a little bit higher at that and still have those sight views as needed. So.
Okay, any other discussion? And just for the record, Member Stan Greger is here, and to get you up to speed.
Thank you, sir.
We are on amendment number 12 on the zoning ordinance.
Thank you.
Do you need a minute to digest, or?
I am up to speed on number 12.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Member Morrell.
This is a question for Liz. Was there a difference in height for the front fence versus the side? Is that where this was stemmed from?
So that's how it was being proposed, and that's what Mr. Whitethorn is suggesting we eliminate. That originally it was proposed where you'd have, if you wanted to do a solid fence, it could only be a certain height on the front and on the street side. If you were willing to do a see-through fence, then you could go all the way to the property line and go up to 6 feet. So it really only affected solid fences on the front yard and on the street side. I can understand it's a little bit confusing, but the idea is it's hard to sort of picture it without pictures. It's a little bit easier to see it. But what you're trying to get at is if you're on corners, you want to make sure that there's visibility on that diagonal on the corner for people to see oncoming traffic or people walking on the sidewalk. And in the yards, really what you're looking at is driveways, and also you want, aesthetically, you want a straight line down the block, as opposed to like this zigzag. And then a 6-foot solid on the front property line, it really blocks light and views all the way down the street, and so you kind of try to get away from that. And those are some aesthetic considerations. But what Amendment 13 does, it kind of eliminates all the aesthetics and just boils it down to just the safety, which is, if you're on a street corner, you want to make sure that you've got that sight for the corner, and if there's a driveway, you want to make sure that when you're backing out of the driveway, that your fence isn't blocking the sidewalk, so if someone's walking or biking down the sidewalk, you can still see them. So, and we currently don't have any of those things. So, did that help, or is that more confusing?
I'm more confused.
More confusing. Sorry.
So, if we were, as an assembly, to vote no for this, then the industrial, this particular amendment, number 12, and industrial and commercial areas, you could still build an 8-foot fence?
If you voted no for this, yeah, it would allow you to build the 8-foot fence. Let me double check here. In the rear yard and in the side yard where it's against another piece of property. And then you'd be at 6 feet. Well, it would step up. So the further you were for the property line on the front, the higher you could go for a solid fence.
I guess my main concern was on industrial, because if you have a piece of industrial property, you want to fence it in to keep people out or people from seeing your equipment or But would you still be able to build to 8 feet if we voted in industrial?
Not with this amendment unless you changed, I mean, you could amend his amendment to allow for 8 feet on industrial and
Or
general
vote it
commercial.
down.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Okay, let's get more confusing the more we dig into them. So any other discussion on amendment number 12? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor,
No.
Jay,
No.
Kurt,
Nope.
Randy,
No.
Bob,
No.
Mark,
No.
Jeff.
No. Okay, amendment number 12 fails unanimously, and that brings us to amendment number 13, which is allow maximum of a 6-foot solid fence in all residential districts and 8-foot solid fence in non-residential districts as long as minimum vision clearance standard is maintained along street corners and driveways. And proposed by the staff, and they have no recommendation, but if I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 13.
Second.
Second amendment, motion been made by member Borough, seconded by member Norheim. Discussion on amendment number 13. Okay, clerk call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Okay, amendment 13 passes unanimously. That brings us to amendment 14, which is clarify street standards and required improvements for subdivisions. Proposed by staff and recommended by staff. I'd entertain a motion to adopt amendment 14.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Lynn. Any discussion? So Liz, can you just give us a little summary for the people listening? Is this just like if you're building a subdivision road, you have to have the utilities up to certain standards? Or I could look on page 38 and read through it myself.
well, I think it really helps clarify what happens outside Service Area 1. So if you're a remote subdivision, which means you're not on Mickoff Island and you're more than half a mile from a public right-of-way, then you aren't required to construct any streets as part of your subdivision approval process. And then if you're outside of Service Area 1, but you're not remote, meaning you're right along Mickoff Highway or something like that, then you'd have to build a road, but you wouldn't have to do it to borough standard because we're not going to maintain it, so you can build it to private road standards. So that's basically what this does. It kind of lays out who gets exempted from having to build things to borough standard. And that's primarily outside of Service Area 1 and remote subdivisions.
Okay.
Just to make it clear as I can make it with the attorney.
So any roads, private roads or whatever built inside Service Area 1 have to be built to borough standards?
Would you, inside or outside, I'm sorry?
Inside Service Area 1.
Private roads inside of Service Area 1, no.
Okay.
If you're subdividing and you're creating more than 4 lots,
okay,
we would consider that a major subdivision, and then that's where you have to build to borough standards. And the borough is going to maintain, accept that road inside Service Area 1.
Okay, and then do maintenance.
If you're under, if you're under the 6, then you're doing you can do a private road.
Okay.
Because it's just a small number of lots, so then there's not as much property to divide up that cost of that road, so.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Any other discussion on Amendment 14? If there's none, clerk call the roll, please.
Kurt,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes. Okay, Amendment 14 passes unanimously, and now that brings us to Amendment number 15, amend maximum distance for cul-de-sac from 400 to 600 feet, proposed by Bob Lynn. Entertain a motion to approve Amendment number 15. Any?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second it.
Motion made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Any discussion? Member Stan Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Member Lynn, I was wondering if you could just briefly explain why you think 400 to 600 makes sense.
I was looking at it from the subdivision standpoint that if I owned a piece of land and it was elongated, and I could only go to one end, I wanted more options in order to lay out my subdivision so that if I had one leg, for instance, that went farther, would go out, and I had to turn around. This just gives more option for that person providing building a subdivision for layout purposes in my mind.
In other words, to maximize the use of your property if need be.
That's the way I see it, and the terrain, yes.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion on amendment number 15? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Wait, was there another?
I just had a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Liz, is this being enforced now? It seems to me like someplace out in Severson subdivision, it's more than 400 feet to the end of the road, to the subdivision, to the cul-de-sac, so.
It's measured from the last cross street out to the end of the, so it's not the entire length from the whole edge of the subdivision, it's actually from the last cross street. That's where we measure from.
Even at that cross street? Oh, sorry.
Oh, and I just did a quick, kind of measurement off the GIS, and they're actually around 400 feet, so.
Mr. Mayor.
Member Walter.
And is that, even if that cross street is a private drive? What I'm thinking of is...
I think I went from platted to platted. So
yeah.
if it's platted, I don't know as far as what got required to be built back in the day. I can't really speak to that, but on Sandy Beach Road and at Severson's, at least the one I looked at, it was a built road, and I just measured off from that built road to the end of the subdivision, the end of this cul-de-sac, it was about 400. So I can't really speak to whatever it is that you're thinking of. Sorry.
Okay, any other discussion on amendment number 15? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, amendment number 15 passes unanimously. That brings us to amendment 16, which is delete requirement to arrange for year-round maintenance on privately maintained roads. That was proposed by Member Lynn, and so I entertain a motion to adopt amendment number 16.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Borough to approve or adopt amendment number 16. Any discussion?
Kirk can go ahead.
Member Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for Liz. So, Liz, is this inside the borough, or is this outside the service area one? Excuse me, is it inside service area one that we're talking, or are we talking about outside service area one?
That'd be both. So if someone decided to build a privately maintained road inside Service Area 1, the same would apply either way.
Okay. Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I can see the reasoning behind having some sort of service to plow roads or having the road plowed in case of emergency services. I mean, you're going to require us to come in there with a fire truck if your house is on fire and you don't have any arrangements for plowing or things. So, I mean, I can see the reasoning why this would be in there. So,
Member Moran.
I guess I got a question for Liz. Is our road one of the privately maintained roads?
Yes, our road is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Member Lynn, and then Member Krager.
I was looking at more from the point of outside Service Area 1. We have a lot of roads out there that are only used part year. And, if the house burns down, we assume that responsibility. So why do you need to arrange for plowing and so forth? I mean, to me, there's no reason for it. And we've done it that way for quite a, that may be going back, but I don't see a need to continue that, at least outside Service Area 1.
Member Walter.
This is thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is directed for Liz. Liz, is there any way that you guys could take this back and maybe make a distinction between inside Service Area 1 versus outside Service Area 1? Because I can see the logic on going both directions there.
Probably not tonight.
That's where we're at in this process.
Then thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I will make an amendment that outside of Service Area 1, we don't need to have a year-round maintenance on privately maintained roads.
Second.
Okay, motion been made by Member Walter, seconded by Member Mucci to amend Amendment 16 to require to delete the requirement to arrange for year-round maintenance on privately maintained roads outside of Service Area 1, and then keep it a requirement inside Service Area 1. So any discussion on the amendment? I would like to just bring up a point, since I have a shop on a privately owned road, and Mr. Whitethorn, who's in our audience, says on Mill Road, I'm talking about Mill Road and Lyons Road, those are two privately owned roads. Because they're not up to borough standards or for whatever reason, that's just the way they are. So this would, people outside of 9 Mile or Service Area 1 wouldn't have to arrange for year-round maintenance, but people inside in those particular cases would. And you know what's up past, well, there's some, no warehouses, but storage lots for gear and stuff upside, above Mr. Whitethorn's welding shop on Mill Road, so that would be required to be maintained, if I understand this right. Is that correct, Liz?
I believe that's what you said, yeah. Yeah.
So, Member Norheim, you had a question?
I guess what exactly does it mean, maintain? I mean, like, obviously plowing, I mean, I plow the road often, but...
I believe what I've read in here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Liz, if I could answer Member Norheim's question right, also includes the road maintenance itself, not just plowing, correct?
Yes.
Chuck holes, whatever, up to whatever borough standard, whatever that may be, in writing, I don't know.
It's not to borough standard per se. Currently, the way we do it is through a special use permit. And in that special use permit, it states that whoever has the permit will build and also maintain that road. I don't think there's anything in there about keeping it plowed or anything like that. At least I can't recall that on ours.
So, yeah, I'd like, total clarity on this before I vote on it, because I'm in favor of deleting it in both areas, actually. But now that we have this amendment, I guess we'll do one thing at a time. Member Walhooter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Liz, so there is an ordinance not right now, or there is some not recommendation, but you said in a special use permit that there is already some obligation to the person that's on that to maintain that road?
Yes.
Okay, so all we're doing here is...
you have to keep it open for anyone to use, for the public to use, and you're responsible for maintaining it.
Okay.
Any other discussion on this amendment, which would delete the requirement to arrange for year-round maintenance outside of Service Area 1 on privately maintained roads and make it so you had to do this inside Service Area 1? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes, I guess.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
No. Okay, so the amendment passes, I believe, so we would we'll go back to the amendment as amended, and this will, if we vote yes on this, it deletes the requirement outside Service Area 1 for this provision, and you have to maintain the roads inside Service Area 1. Is my understanding of where we're at here, right?
Right, so all I was going to do was add the phrase outside of Service Area 1 at the end of the sentence. So basically...
Right, and so we need to add that language into here. So it would be delete requirement to arrange for year-round maintenance on privately maintained roads outside of Service Area 1, but keep it in place inside Service Area 1. Right. Is that adequate language for the Assembly? Member Walhooter?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So this is already in play. So we are not adding anything new. What we did was we just kind of grabbed the people outside of Service Area 1, tried to include them in something that's already required on the inside. So that's why I decided we would separate it in my mind. So I'll be voting yes to keep it as it is right now for inside Service Area 1.
So any other discussion? Member Norheim?
I mean, I guess I'm a little confused about what exactly this is making me do any different than what I'm doing now or for what you're doing now. Nothing's going to change, right? I mean,
Now, you already have your road built, you already have your special, well, actually, you don't, I have the special use agreement.
Right. Okay.
So, for roads that are already built, you don't retro back, so we're not going to be establishing these agreements for roads that are already in existence. Those roads either already have a special use permit that a property owner has, or I assume have some sort of arrangement with the borough on how they're handled. But we're not going backwards in terms of now we're going to issue you a new thing for an already built road. These are roads that have not yet been built.
Right.
So this is just moving forward, if that helps.
So is that clarified in writing somewhere in this code? We're grandfathered in, I guess is what we're getting at, because currently I'm just talking about private experience because I happen to be in this situation, not because I want to benefit or one way or another, but currently my road on Lyons Road, well, I own part of the road, I guess, 150 feet, 75 feet, so I'm responsible for that, but the borough plows now up to that, just past my property, because there's a couple other properties farther up the road than mine, and I believe it's to pick up garbage.
My guess would be, and Chris could probably clarify, is that the borough is probably not under any obligation to plow if it's not a borough-owned road, but there are sometimes other reasons why they do, such as being able to pick up garbage or having access to certain things, but right. That's my guess, right?
Because I don't have any kind of an agreement with the borough that I know of.
And you probably should have agreements with the surrounding property owners is really what I would think you would want to share the cost of maintaining and plowing if the borough ever decided that they were no longer going to plow that road. Because that way you're all obligated to share equally in the cost of maintaining and that road. If there isn't any other agreement, then that's usually what people do, is all of the property owners share in the cost. But if that's not been established for that private road and you don't have a special use agreement, then you're kind of all out there at the mercy of whether the borough wants to plow or not plow, because it's not a borough-owned road and the borough never accepted it.
Yeah, I'm well aware of they haven't accepted it. So.
And in fact, I don't think that's even a right-of-way. I think it's just you own the property, but there's just a public easement through it, right?
There is a utility easement.
Yeah, so it's not even it's not a right-of-way.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Any other discussion? Member Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want some clarification now that we've gone around several times here. So, tell me, what does a yes vote mean and what a no vote means?
Shall I give my version of it?
See if somebody's version
can accept it. So what this does, if you vote yes, we've already voted to amend it, where it says delete requirement to arrange for year-round maintenance on privately maintained roads outside of Service Area 1, and keep that requirement in place inside Service Area 1. Okay. So a yes vote would mean if you're outside 9 Mile or Service Area 1, you aren't obligated to this, but if you're inside, then you have to make arrangements. For instance, I'm going to use an example again. If I'm gone and I'm required to hire someone to plow my 75 feet of road for the year. So that's just another, which is fine if that's the way the vote goes. That's just an example. Remember, Michi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that's currently the way it is. Is that right? They have to maintain the road and plow the road, but the city comes in and plows the road from time to time, so garbage and...
Right, that's the way it is now.
Yeah.
Right. I just wondered what, okay, so. Anyway, we're voting as amended on amendment number 16. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Taylor?
No.
Okay. Amendment number 16 as amended passes with a 5-2 vote with Member Norheim and Jensen voting no, and Mayor Jensen. So now we're on to 17. Delete option to require insurance policy for privately maintained roads. It was proposed by Member Lynn, and there's no recommendation by staff, but I would entertain a motion to adopt amendment number 17 or approve it.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion? Member Stan Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Member Lynn would be so kind to explain to the Assembly and those listening at home your line of thinking, please.
Well, I think we're going to get into the same issues we had before as inside and outside. Looking at it, the attorney recommends, I have to say this, the attorney recommends retaining this option to require an insurance policy. Says there may be cases such as large subdivisions with many families using the road where the borough would deem it prudent for an entity to have insurance in place in the event there was an accident within the right-of-way. But that seems to me that would have to be, if you're within the right-of-way, the mayor was talking about him owning to the center of the road. I also have a piece of property outside that goes to the center of a private road. And so on that, I assume I'm liable, because I hold insurance for it. But why would I have to, with the other members on that, why do I have to have a road policy? That doesn't make sense to me. And it also doesn't make sense inside Service Area 1 to me, other than maybe if the city takes over, then the rules change, if you were to do that. But it just doesn't make sense to require me to have an insurance policy on a road where there's 6 or 7 houses there and it's a privately maintained road outside Service Area 1. But I'd make the same argument that the mayor made inside Service Area 1 on some of these other roads.
Thank you for clarifying, sir.
Any other discussion? I have a question for Liz. Now, she raised her hand already. So, what is on the books currently? Privately owned roads, are they required to have an insurance policy?
I was just going to say, currently, we don't require it. For a special use permit to build a private road in the right-of-way, we do not require an insurance policy.
So how can, so in the new code, we do have that option.
Right. It would give the borough the option to require it. But currently, we do not. Currently, like, right now.
Okay, just for a hypothetical question here, with what Member Lynn said about our attorney recommending it, what is your feeling on the borough's future actions on this, I guess, would be the right.
At risk of disagreeing with the attorney, I don't think it's very practical because we don't really have an entity that can hold the insurance policy. So unless we're going to require a homeowners association made up of all the people that own the property there, and then have that homeowners association hold the insurance policy, otherwise we're going to have each individual homeowner be on the insurance policy, and then they sell the house, and then you're going to have a new homeowner, and you have to change the policy. I don't think it's very practical. I mean, it's certainly not a requirement. It's an option. I suppose if we ended up in a situation where we were suddenly having lots of big-time developers come in making big-time subdivisions, then it might be something we would want to put on the books. If we had gated communities and homeowners associations. I don't see that while I'm still working here, happening. So I just think it's a little bit too fussy myself.
Okay, so I see no recommendation by staff, but on this amendment number 17. But so a yes vote means we delete the option. If we vote no on this, that means the privately maintained road owners have to have an insurance policy.
No. It's just an option.
It's an option.
It's not required. Yeah, it would be to the borough's option.
It can be enforced by the borough.
The borough could opt to require it, but it's not an automatic, you have to have it in order to get the private road. Okay?
Right, but this is establishing a new position that the borough can take on privately maintained roads. That's where I'm getting at. So, anyway, Member Walter.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. We can go back and grab this option anytime we want when it looks like it's necessary. If we don't currently have it right now, I mean, this is just a working document. I mean, we can amend it or put something into it at any given time that we want to. So I'm going to be voting no on this for right now.
Okay, any other comments? Member Norham, looks like you've got something on the tip of your tongue.
Maybe. Basically, this is just letting, like, who would make the call on whether or not to go to the option and say that they need to get insurance?
Generally, it would probably be staff. So we would probably have a conversation between the Public Works Director and how big the subdivision is, or it could come from the Planning Commission, could come from different places.
Okay, and then would that have to be voted on by the Assembly?
No.
It would just be somebody in government said, now you
Yeah.
have to have insurance?
But the folks could appeal that decision if they wanted to the Assembly. So if they wanted to fight about it, they could.
Member Stattenberger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I look at this one like I look at a lot of the other ones. For the sake of argument, I'll be voting yes, I'm fine deleting that option. And if somewhere down the line we realize that this is, as Director Cabrera dramatically illustrated, large-scale development come in, we could always, within 3 readings, change it back and do something different. So I feel just fine voting this right now, because this is, in essence, going to be a living document. Nothing's guaranteed if we run into problems. So I'll be voting yes.
Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll on Amendment 17, please.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Nope. Okay, amendment number 17 passes with a 6-1 vote with member Walhooter voting no, and that brings us to amendment number 18. Delete 4.1.050 and replace with new version to clarify public hearing requirement. Proposed by staff and recommended by staff. I'd entertain a motion to approve amendment number 18.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Lynn to approve amendment number 18. Any discussion? Quick clarification, Liz, or a little summary for people listening?
Sure.
Sarah?
Basically, it just clarifies the public hearing procedure for applications that are decided by the Assembly. They might be reviewed by the Planning Commission, but decided by the Assembly, and it just illustrates, decides where we're going to have the public hearing in that process. And then also establishes a process for when we approve the initial zoning map. Currently, we would have to send a letter to everybody for their own property, plus every property within 600 feet of their property. So, we'd send 100 letters to some people. This way, we're just going to send the one to every property holder, as opposed to having to follow the way the code is usually written.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes. Okay, amendment 18 passes unanimously. Next amendment, 19, definition of automotive boat services major. The Planning Commission proposed this, and I don't see a staff recommendation, but I entertain a motion to approve amendment 19.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Moreau. Discussion? And I've read through this, but let's maybe a brief summary of this one too.
Sure, probably should have recommended approval, but the Planning Commission has in there how it will not allow major automotive and boat repair services as a home occupation. So in order to do that, we needed a definition of what is major versus what is minor. And so that's all that establishes is these are major services. We wouldn't allow that, but if you're doing just minor, we are going to allow that.
Oil changes, et cetera, and welding, I read through that, so it made sense to me. Any more discussion on amendment 18, or 19, I guess, we're almost done. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes. Okay, amendment number 19 passes unanimously. That brings us to amendment 20.
You don't have to do 20.
Oh, that's, yeah, okay, I was just going to ask, what's that? We already did that because we adopted it. So is that all of the amendments, or is there any other amendments that an assembly member would like to propose at this time?
Mr. Mayor, what about these? Was there anything discussed about those?
Not applicable amendment. What do you, member Liz? The member Stan Gregor asked, extend one-year limit on building permits, establish standards for timeshares. They weren't, I remember Whitethorn, or Jim Whitethorn bringing that up, and is that?
I don't have amendments for them because they don't apply to this code, so there's no place to put those in here. They don't fit in here. His concern was that a one-year time limit on building permits is too short. Well, we don't have a one-year time limit on building permits.
I was just going to ask, so if I start a home in construction in 2019 and it's not complete till 2020, I use the original building permit I bought in 2019?
Yeah.
Don't have to renew it?
No.
No fee, okay.
So
Thank you for that clarification. I can see where that wouldn't apply. Any other member Walhoder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Liz, again, there is no limit right now on the length of building permits.
I didn't say that. I said it wasn't 1 year. It's 180 days. You're supposed to start work within 180 days of pulling a permit.
Okay.
And then as long as work doesn't stop for more than 180 days. We have not strictly enforced that requirement in the past, but that is what's in building code, not in here. It's in our building code. And then the building official can provide extensions on that. So has a building permit ever expired? Not to my knowledge. And I think you know that very well, Mr. Walhier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to clarify, for simplicity's sake, as long as you keep working and actually using your permit, you're in good standing with the borough.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Member Lynn, you had a comment?
I have a question, or maybe looking at the motion that we're going to make on the main party here, of the non-conforming versus conforming uses, and you and I talked earlier about grandfathering. Would you give a brief explanation of what we're talking about by non-conforming versus conforming, and what's grandfathered and not under the new code?
I'll strive for brevity. So grandfathered in uses and structures, in code talk, it's called a non-conforming use because it's something that exists now that you wouldn't be able to do under the current code. There's 3 different types. One is non-conforming use, so that's if you have an industrial use in a residential area. That type of use can continue without any limit as long as the use continues. You cannot have that use, terminate that use, and then 10 years later, say, well, we had this grandfather use in 10 years ago, so now we want to reestablish it. You cannot do that. But if the use continues all along, we're not going to stop that use from continuing until you decide that you want to change. Then there's non-conforming developments. So those are structures that don't meet setbacks. Maybe they're too large for the lot or something like that. We're obviously not going to make anybody tear anything down that currently exists. So those are considered non-conforming structures, and they remain. If they are damaged or destroyed more than 50%, we're going to ask you to build it under the existing code, the new code, which means adhere to the setbacks that currently exist. If you cannot, then you're going to have to go through a variance process and see what the Planning Commission can do for you as far as letting you go back into those encroachments. But we're going to strive to move you towards conformity, especially on setbacks, just because of fire code and things like that. There are cases where people have houses on somebody else's property, We're not going to ask you to move that, but if something happened where you had to rebuild, we sure as heck are going to ask that you put it on your own property. Yeah. So, and then the last one is non-conforming lots, and those were lots that were created before we had zoning and subdivision standards, so they might be smaller than what we would require now. You can still build on those lots. Those are still legal lots. We're not going to say, oh, you can't build because they're too small or anything like that. You might require a variance, and generally, if you have too small a lot, I don't want to say guaranteed, but you're pretty much guaranteed getting a variance because we recognize that, the area that you're dealing with is below what somebody else would be dealing with in a similar district. So,
does that explain your questions, Lynn? I have a question, Liz, on just a clarification on Member Lynn's question about grandfathering in. And so, hypothetically, for instance, if someone has a industrial function on a piece of residential property, you're allowing that to continue?
Yeah.
What if the ownership changes of the property?
It's not ownership, it's use. So if the use continues, then you're fine. Yeah.
Good.
That was my question.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is more just parliamentary, since something would help me before we vote on the as amended with this is I would love, I know this is the right place, or I can wait to whenever that is. I came in on number 12. I would love to know how the amendments fared out prior to that at some point.
I was going to ask the clerk to give us a summary of the yes/no.
Thank you, sir.
I understand totally.
So I know what I'm voting on.
Right. Good call.
Man, Liz, have you been keeping track?
Yep.
Mike?
I have to.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Is now an appropriate time to ask for that?
Yeah, that would be great then before we vote on the
Thank you, sir.
third reading.
So amendments 1 through 3 were all approved. Amendment 4 was approved to 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
So it was amended from, okay. And then, let's see, 5 through 8 were approved. Amendment 9 failed. 10 and 11 were approved. Number 12 failed. 13, 14, 15 were approved. 16 was approved for outside service area 1 only. 17, 18, 19 were approved, and 20 was not applicable.
Thank you. May I ask a quick follow-up? Sure. Thank you. Clerk Thompson, so that means the one that failed, number 9, allow up to 10,000 square foot market gardens in all residential districts. That one failed, but number 10, clarifying food production is allowed as a home occupation, passed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 9 failed due to
no motion was made.
Oh, it didn't get a motion?
No.
No. Okay.
I believe, was that right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to keep track. Okay, so now that we have the amendments all gone through, now we're back to voting on the main motion, which is to approve ordinance 2018-18, and that's an ordinance amending the Petersburg Municipal Code by repealing titles 18, subdivision, and 19, zoning, and adopting a new borough development code. So is there any discussion on the main motion as amended? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes. So, ordinance 2018-18 passes in its third and final reading as amended. I would like to take a 5-minute break, if we could, please, or whatever it takes. Order. And the next item on the agenda.
Can I open with that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oop, easy.
Excuse me.
Not a problem. I would like to make a motion to reconsider amendment number 9 on ordinance 18-18.
Excuse me. Is there a second? Second. Okay, motion's been made to reconsider item 9 on 2018-18. And seconded by Member Walter. Motion was made by Member Steinberger. Excuse me, I have something stuck in my throat, so I might have to take another break. But
Got some water there?
yeah, I do.
Okay.
So, discussion. You made the maker of the motion gets the first chance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Member Wolhuter, for a second. It was my own doing that I was late for that, so thank you for taking it back up. I understand the staff recommendation of no, of fear of connexes or industrial growing operations on borough lots, but I don't really see that as a, I just can't see, I can't see that happening. I see the upside as being much more significant than the down. Letters have been written from Mary Coppice, Bo and Maria out at Farragut Farms, and I wanted to say on the record that I was for it and encourage members to vote that direction also, because I don't see the fear of this turning into an industrial garden community. That's my 2 cents, so I'll be voting for that.
Any other discussion on the reconsideration on topic, Amendment 9? Member Walhooter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I know when this first came up, I must have been asleep at the wheel, because it went by me and I just went, I don't think I was going to say something about that. I should have made a motion, but, you know, I think there's people now that have small gardens, you know, in their yards and things like that, and, you know, they're sharing vegetables with other people. I get potatoes from certain people that have gardens, and I think this would be a good idea, you know, for some of those people that have a little excess of crops like they usually sometimes do, you know, that they would have an outlet for them, make a little bit of money on it. So I think I'm in favor of this too. And I think if it looks like it gets a little out of hand, then I think we can rein it in a little bit with another amendment. So I'll be voting yes.
Member Norheim?
So I guess my understanding of this is that you can, if we allow this, then you can buy a piece of residential property and not have a house on it and just turn it into a garden instead?
Less than 10,000 square feet of a lot, so that's 100 by 100 lot, or whatever the size would be. That would be 20 by 50, just for example, of a lot. Is that correct, Liz, that you could buy a residential lot and not build a home on it, just put a garden on it?
Correct. And the planting area would be less than 10,000 square feet, so 100 by 100 lot.
Planted area.
So you could use all of it basically for planting or containers, or, you know, you could cover it, the entire lot.
But you could only plant on less than 10,000 square feet.
Yeah, but that's an entire 100 by 100 lot, yeah. But planting could be like you're putting containers down, is, you know, when I mentioned in here that you could just do a bunch of connexes as your 10,000 square feet.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Remember, Lynn?
Could I then put in a greenhouse and put a hydroponic garden on it without building a house?
Yep. If I may, just elaborate.
Yes, you may, but
so just, I mean, it's, in theory, I have no problem with it. I think the scale is probably a bit much for residential, and that's really why the oppose stamp is on there. I think if we wanted to allow commercial food production in residential areas, I would recommend that maybe going back to talking to Farragut and Mary and maybe figuring out if we could scale it down a little bit and put in a few more parameters. When this was drawn up, this market garden, it really was established to allow it in commercial area, because the way our code is written, it would only be allowed in industrial. And they asked, could we do it in commercial? And the Planning Commission amended it and allowed it to be in commercial. But then you're going from what was established for industrial and then set up for commercial, and now you're extending it into residential. I think that kind of use is pretty intensive, or could be really intensive for a residential neighborhood. So that's my only concern. And once you open the gate on that, you can ratchet it down, but what's already out the gate is already out the gate. You can't take that back. As you know, we have really good grandfathering in our code. So whatever people do, you know, that we can't undo that. So if you're interested in pursuing this, and I agree, I think it's a cool idea, I think we could do it. I'm just concerned about extending into residential something that was specifically created to only go into really commercial. And if you gave us a chance to spend a little more time, maybe we could craft something that would be more appropriate for residential.
Member Norheim, you have a hand up?
So I guess a concern would be, I hear and I see that it's not cheap to live here, like house prices, all that is very expensive. So if we do end up having some cheap property coming up for sale, all of a sudden you're not competing with people to purchase that land for your house. Maybe somebody wants to start up a market garden there, and now instead of being able to just buy the property to put your small house on, you're now competing with a farm who wants to put a garden there instead. And now you're out of house because, well, they wanted a garden.
Okay, is there,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Liz, so I went backwards. What if we ratchet it down now as an amendment, and then we could look at bringing it up? So what if we made a proposal of, say 2,500 square feet, an amendment, to 2,500 square feet, and let's just see how it rides. Because I think there's already a garden in my neighborhood there. It's pretty close to that size, and I'm not sure if they're selling in the gardens, in the markets, but it doesn't seem to be, obtrusive in my sight or anything. It's kind of lovely to see the sunflowers above the fence, when I go by. So anyway, that's going to be my thought.
Hey, Member Stan Gregory, have a comment?
Yeah, just, something for Director Cabrera. Like, I echo that concern in theory of somebody buys this lot for commercial garden use, but commercial gardening is not highly profitable. Yeah, kind of to speak to what Member Norham brought up, and please, Director Cabrera, call me out if I'm speaking inaccurately here, because I feel like I'm being a bit dramatic, but I have a really hard time envisioning someone buying this lot in Petersburg, just grow vegetables on it and expect that they're going to turn some major profit and, pay off their lot and make money. Something that I think could make sense is say, okay, I own 2 lots and this would be a fun side project for me, and turning one of those into that and proceeding accordingly. It just seemed, with respect, it seems like a bit of a reach that somebody would make that their financial investment. If you care to respond, feel free. That's just kind of my line of thinking on it.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you, but that's not what you're setting up. If you want to set up the scenario that you're talking about, which is, I have a couple of lots and I have a house and I want to sell, grow some food and sell it, then that's very different than what you're creating under this, because what you're creating under this is a primary use of food production. So I agree. If someone wants to, have a 1,000, 2,000 square foot garden next to their house and sell at the market, I think that's great. And I would love to work something up like that to put into this, but that's not what this does. And it's a different deal and a little bit more complex.
Kind of. But
you're not creating what you think you're creating here. You're not creating that little house with the little garden next to it.
Oh, I think maybe you misunderstand me, Director Cabrera, that 100 by 100 lots, let's say, joined to my own, cool, that could be increasing food security by the idea of growing enough vegetables to sell to the store or whatever, beyond even market level of that. I mean, I feel like I understand what it's saying, but the extreme end of that, as far as having connexes lining lots in towns, as I've already said, it seems like a bit of a reach, but I'm good.
Okay, so any other discussion on this reconsideration? And we're just reconsidering amendment number 9.
One more statement, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Member Waller.
Okay, one more comment to Liz. Hey, Liz, would this be more palatable if we were to change it to 2,500 square feet for the sake of an argument right now?
Well, the other part of it is it does allow for on-site sales. So twice a week for a few hours. So basically, if your street filled up with cars twice a week, I mean, that's up to you guys. If you want to have that traffic. My experience with dealing with commercial uses in residential areas, it could be problematic. And then we have a hard time pulling back on something that we've given. So I would rather craft it correctly the first time out than have to deal with the repercussions and people being really upset because suddenly there's a commercial operation next door to them, and that's not what they signed up for when they bought the house. So that's my only concern, is when we start hitting that residential area. And anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so and like we've talked earlier, this is, could be up for change in the future, right? They could make a proposal to planning and zoning and go through planning and zoning to, change this to maybe be more palatable, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, is there any other discussion on the amendment, the revisiting it, lack of the right word? Okay, reconsideration. Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
No.
Mark,
No.
Taylor,
No.
Jeff,
Yes.
Randy,
No.
Bob,
No.
Okay, the reconsideration for item 9 failed with a 5-2 vote, and I would encourage the people that brought this forward, if they feel strongly about it, to try to bring it up and we'll revisit it. Okay, so we're on to ordinance for the second reading. Ordinance, make sure I'm not skipping anything here. Ordinance 2018-20, an ordinance amending section 3.08.120C of the municipal code entitled Assembly Meetings Agenda to add the Pledge of Allegiance to the agenda and to change the agenda title of Visitors' Views to Persons to be Heard. I'll entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So, second.
Motion been made by Member Morrow, seconded by Member Walhuter. Is there any discussion on ordinance 2018-20? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2018-20 passes unanimously in its second reading. It'll be the final reading at the next meeting. The next item under,
Unfinished business.
what's that?
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business, yeah. I didn't see that. Oh, there it is, way up there. Unfinished business is 18-408, proposed land trade with Petro Marine. So I'd entertain a motion to approve this land trade, since we have to make a motion in the positive.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion been made by Member Beach, I believe, seconded by Member Walhuter. Discussion. Maker of the motion technically has the first right to speak, but I'm the one that asked to have this on the agenda. But I think we need to reconsider what action we took at the last meeting. There's some new information that has come out. One is the assessment of the roof condition, which doesn't add much of a monetary value to it, which is $3,000, which is what the person estimated it would cost. But we also received an estimate, just without any design work, but an estimate from P&D Engineering, and their unofficial estimate was around $400,000 for the Dolphin now, so that's a substantially larger number than the last figure that we were throwing around in this equation. So, any other discussion? Member Stan Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me clarify. So what is the motion for exactly?
Actually, I would hope, it would actually take a motion to rescind our former motion if we were to change our direction to the manager to negotiate.
Sorry, just to clarify, that's what's on the floor right now, a motion to rescind.
No, that isn't.
I'm a little confused here, if we could clarify what we're doing.
Well, that's why we talked to the clerk about this today, and maybe that should have been part of the narrative here, what we were trying to do. But that would be my, would like to see some more discussion on this and possibly a motion to rescind this, which either someone that was on the yes side or the no side of the last vote can do that on a motion to rescind.
So what's on the table right now? Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can you clarify what's the current motion, just so I know where I'm at?
The motion is to move forward with the land trade, just to get along as discussion. And that's what I put in the dollar figures here that have come into the equation.
Can you clarify? I'm sorry.
Debbie, can you clarify it any further than that from our discussions?
And can I give you some direction what I'm looking for?
Yes.
This seems like a loaded question in a lot of ways, and I'm struggling with it, so bear with me.
Yes.
So a motion to continue negotiations means like a loaded thing, so we're already doing that.
Correct.
So the motion doesn't make any sense for what we're currently doing. Are you following me so far?
I am. I think that the original motion right out of the gate should have been to rescind rather than to move forward, because we're already moving forward.
It's like a double negative kind of thing.
Can we make I guess you can make a motion to rescind. It's not in the positive. That was always under the assumption that you had to make, the motion had to be made in the positive.
Well,
So this
how
is
in the
a...
world would you ever rescind anything? So I see what you're saying. We could say, I'm not sure that it really matters that much, one way or the other. We could continue in the way we're going, the motion being made to continue negotiations. Then if someone wants to make a motion to rescind, we'll vote on that. I would think that the original motion would need to be withdrawn then. Does that make sense?
That's why I could see Member Stanton Gregor's confusion.
Yes.
Any other input on this?
No, I'll hold back for now.
I guess, so what was the original estimated cost of this dolphin? I'm not seeing it.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, was around the $200,000 value.
So it's doubled.
Is that correct, Manager? The harbor master's not here.
Correct. We had estimates, but they're about 8 years old that, threw out a number around $200,000 to build the Dolphin. And then we asked, P&D, Glow asked P&D if they could do kind of a back of the envelope write-up. And they provided the information that I sent out to all of you. So
is there any other discussion? We'll go ahead, Member Stanton.
Thank you. Now that I've got my clarifiers from the parliamentary end of things, in that case, I'm a bit, go figure, I'm a bit confused. So 2 weeks ago, we gave the manager direction to negotiate this land swap. And as we all thoroughly discussed, it's a negotiation. It's going to go where it's going to go. So find the roof, the Dolphin, that's part of the negotiations. And maybe anybody call me out if I'm thinking about this backwards. But we've empowered our manager to negotiate this land swap. Whether it succeeds or fails is irrelevant at this point. My vision of a negotiation is you going and negotiating, $400,000 is a big number. You, sir, your job is to negotiate that with Petro as far as, suddenly 120 doesn't, meaning I find myself a little frustrated that we're discussing it again a week later because, again, my vision of negotiation is you go work through that stuff like we've told you to do and come back with, here's the best we could get on the negotiations. What do you think now? I don't want to be a micromanager of you every 2 weeks, every step along the way saying, hey, this detail came up, Steve. That's your job. To weed through those things. So I guess obviously I'm voting yes if it stays the way it is because do your job. I mean that with all respect to you, Mr. Manager. That's what you do, and I expect you to continue doing so until you come to a place where you've reached the end of negotiations and you're like, here's the best we've got. And then we as a whole get together and decide, as we already discussed. I mean, I don't feel like I'm missing there. And that's... Go ahead.
Got your point. Any other discussion? My point for wanting to bring this back up was because of the new dollars associated with this moving forward. And I understand we did give the manager direction to negotiate with Petro, and the next step in that negotiation would be spending money on appraisals, I'm assuming. So before we started going down the road where more money was spent, in my mind, even making it a more expensive proposition, I thought I would put it back on the agenda. And I don't feel that that's out of line when we're talking about, lost revenue and spending taxpayers' money if there's new information that comes up on the topic that we as an assembly discuss it. So then that's why I was on here. And if we don't get a motion to rescind this from the last meeting, then I guess, if the manager just moves forward and we'll go from there. Member Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to be supporting this ordinance. It's just like Member Stanton Greer said, it's just part of the negotiation that we've given Steve direction to. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of new information coming up, and I don't think just because a new piece of information comes up, we need to bring it before the body and sort it out, at an assembly meeting. Eventually, Steve's going to bring back his findings and his ideas on what the negotiations and how it's going and what he's thinking. But as far as I'm concerned, the will of the assembly has been to move forward with this, and we'll just see how the negotiation plays out. We don't need to spend we can spend a lot of time on this issue, but if we're going to spend a lot of time on every meeting because a new piece of information comes up. It's not really, I mean, eventually we'll be talking about this stuff, but we're just in a preliminary process of negotiating with Petro, and I'm going to be voting to go forward with this process.
Member Norham?
Obviously, our harbor master's not here anymore. Does anybody know how she feels about this new price tag? I mean,
I would have I can't speak for the harbor master, but I think she's in favor of the land swap.
Unfazed by the...
So I can't speak for harbor master, like I said, so. So, is there any other discussion? Without a motion to rescind, we'll just vote on the proposed land trade moving forward. Member Stan Gregor.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, this is a parliamentary question, I apologize. Is it even appropriate to vote on moving forward at this point since
The motion's been made.
Motion's been made, we have to vote.
Cool, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, clerk call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
No.
Baylor?
Sorry. I'll go with yes for now, yeah.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
No. Okay, so what was the vote on that for my notes?
5-2.
5-2? Okay, so we're going to keep moving forward with that negotiation. New business is the next item on the agenda, item 15. And the first item is ordinance 2018-21, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2019 budget for known changes. Entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2018-21 in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, just for the people listening, motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor, and this ordinance is actually a supplemental budget. If adopted, ordinance 2018-21 in 3 readings will use $400,000 of sanitation funds and $200,000 of sanitation motor pool funds for the baler equipment replacement expense. So is there any other discussion? Member Morrell?
I just have a question. Jody, do you know how much would be left in the reserves? I just out of curiosity.
There would be about $200,000 left in the sanitation reserves.
After
in the sanitation fund, if you were to expend $600,000, and there would be about $60,000 at the end of this fiscal year left in the motor pool fund for the sanitation department. There's actually over $4 million in the motor pool fund, but only around $260,000 of it is sanitations.
Is that clear, or do you have another?
Does that include for all sanitation equipment, the loaders, everything like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion, Member Lynn?
I'm still back to my earlier question. If we go forward with this, then is the RFQ going to talk about looking at new technologies and other ways to do business?
And I'm still unclear on what you mean by that.
Well, if you're going to buy a piece of equipment, I don't want to go back and buy 1930s equipment. I want to look at what's out there on the market, what's been done, what other, what other municipalities have done, and, look at something that's going to last us for the next 30, 40 years. That's kind of where I'm at with it, and that's my question.
Yeah, well, and I did think I addressed that earlier, that we are going to be looking at making this, obviously the most efficient and, we'll say the most durable plant that we can get for the money. That's part of the discussion we're going to be having in the next few weeks. And, as far as a 30 to 40 year lifespan, based on what I have learned from talking to other municipalities and observed, I don't know if that is a realistic lifespan for this type of plant, but that will come into the equation too. We need to figure out what the duration is, what the expected service life is of the equipment. One of the things we're going to try and do moving forward, that we'll be talking about in the budget process, is I'm going to be proposing that we incorporate the baler into, the motor pool replacement fund and forward fund it just like we do with our other pieces of equipment. Portion of the baler is already in the motor pool fund replacement program. That's the conveyor, essentially a conveyor belt. But we would like to make the entire baling machine, a part of that motor pool program, and so that at the end of whatever anticipated service life we come up with, 20, 25, 30 years, whatever it is, that at that point we have now funded the replacement of that equipment. Does that answer your question?
No, but I'll leave it rest for now.
All right.
Member Waller and then Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Chris, how many, kind of going down the same vein that Bob's going down there, I'll try to make it clear. How many options do you have out there for people that provide balers?
There are, several. I don't know how many manufacturers. There's a bunch, that the recycling industry alone has lots of different manufacturers. There are, go ahead.
Just one more follow-up question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is for Chris. So, Chris, I think I heard you earlier today say that when you write up your RFP, you're going to, write it in such a form that you're telling these manufacturers what you have, what you need, and then they're going to then provide you with the proper equipment. So I think that might answer Bob's question too, as long as you don't write a very specific RFP that says, I want this same stuff that we had already. Say, what are my options? This is kind of our boundaries on price tag-ish, so what do you have to offer? So I think you'll do a good job there. I think we've got some...
Yeah, right now we're just voting to approve the expenditure of the funds.
Right, that's why, so I'm going to vote for this.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to be voting for this as well. And I agree with Member Lynn that we got to be looking in the future. We got to see what's out there. I don't want to buy a piece of equipment that met our needs 2 or 3 years ago. I want to make sure that we're looking out there 5 years ahead of time, seeing what the technology is, seeing how we can adapt it to meet our future needs, not to deal with the issues that we're dealing with right now. There might be a better piece of equipment out there during this RFP process. That's what I'm hoping that you do, is come up with some good alternatives for us to kind of sort out. But I think your report earlier told us about what's going on up with the baler, and I think we need to do something, if not different, something that meets our current needs and the needs 5 years down the line. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this approval of the supplemental budget? I'm a little concerned with appropriating, I guess you could call it, $600,000, letting $600,000, to go towards this project. I know we'll view it again when we come back with RFPs, but I don't know if this is where Member Lynn's going. Is there a better option for Petersburg than baling? I mean, dollar-wise. I'm talking, just dollars and cents for the ratepayers. I mean, even if you looked at a landfill again. I mean, can we get a landfill, or that's just some of my concerns. So is there any other comments from other members that haven't spoken on this? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think the city manager spoke earlier that they can't really move forward unless we get the funds moved so that we can kind of figure out what our budget is on something, on an item that we want to purchase up at the baler. I think this is the first step, as far as I understand it. This is the first step. Second step would be for the Public Works Director to come up with an RFP to meet our current and future needs. And then once he has a recommendation, then they'll go out to a bid process. And am I misunderstanding that, or Mr. Mayor?
Can you speak to that, Steve?
I can. Chris, jump in if I say any of this wrong. One of the things we'll do, if the Assembly approves this, is we'll develop an RFP. A big part of an RFP is, it stands for Request for Proposals, meaning Chris will outline, this is what we do. We get this much tonnage of garbage it's made up of this kind of material, we get this much recycling, and this is how we get it south to, where it goes. What can you do for us? We'll also include what we're currently doing, meaning here's the type of equipment we've used, and this is our level of expertise. It's up to the people that we send that to respond back and say, hey, we've got a new latest, greatest baler, or, you know what, hey, have you ever thought of fill in the blank, doing it this way? We're seeing more and more municipalities going this direction. We're not going to know that until they respond to the RFPs and say, hey, really for the volume of trash and recycling that you're using and dealing with, this is the most efficient way. These are people in that industry, and we're going to have to take, to a certain extent, what their expertise into play here. They may come back with the same old equipment we've got now with just a newer version, or they may come back with something totally different that we're not thinking of. We won't know that until they respond to the RFPs. Anyway, I hope, Chris, did I get close to that?
Yeah, that's definitely on track there. I was going to make, just bring up for everyone listening, also the fact that, this ordinance adjusting the budget, this is just the first reading. We have to go through 3 readings, so nothing's finalized tonight. There's additional readings and time for additional questions and so forth to come forward. So,
thanks for your input. Member Walhorter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Chris, do you have any idea what DEC or EPA have think about open pit garbage dumps? Like what if, it looks like we got a lot of hillside, that we could push this over. Is that even an option?
Dollar-wise, no.
Well, I mean, what does EPA and DEC say about it? I mean, is it allowable?
It's allowable, and it's very expensive. Mm-hmm. It was the primary reason, the borough or the city at the time moved away from an open landfill, and it's only gotten more expensive since then. You're talking about, millions in development costs for a new landfill. I'm not even sure we could reopen our existing landfill. One of the things, I think I covered this in an email to the manager, and I can't remember if the assembly was in on that or not, but I did provide some information too on one of my previous reports to the assembly, but the FAA had some major objections to our landfill because it attracted birds and created a nuisance for airliners flying in and out. And so since we closed up, accepting household garbage in our landfill, that hasn't been a problem. But I fully expect that would come back to the forefront if we tried to reopen our landfill. And even with the requirements of daily cover, then you get in, that costs a lot of money because they want you to cover up the garbage every day. You have to get that fill from somewhere. There's a cost associated with that. There's a lot of regulatory costs that come into play. Your operational costs are way higher than what it costs us to bail and ship garbage. When I talked to Lenny Neely, who is the Ketchikan Solid Waste Superintendent, when I was down at Southeast Conference, I had a nice visit with him. He took me around their facilities, talked to me for several hours. He said he's run the numbers all out, and by his calculations, it would have to cost you $250 a ton to ship waste before it would make sense to open a landfill for household garbage. I haven't verified those numbers, but I don't have any trouble believing them after just the preliminary costs of, that I've looked into for reopening a landfill. That's just one option, for disposing of waste, but in my opinion, it's one that is very costly, and we can run that to ground if you want us to, but I can tell you right now where it's going to end up. So.
Okay, and like someone mentioned earlier, this is just the first reading of a ordinance. We have public hearing the next time in 3 readings, so if there's no other discussion, Will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2018-21 passes unanimously. The next item, item A under new business, has been postponed until the first meeting in January. Were we also intending with that motion to, of the public policy and community service grant application? Well, that's something different. Well, hang on a minute. No, it isn't. So we're going to address this one, this item B then, approval of the fiscal year 2020 budget policy and community service grant application? Or was that intended to be put off till the first meeting in January as well?
I intended to.
Okay, so all these items, the items that pertain to the budget and capital projects list and policies were to be, that was part of the motion?
Yeah. No, I intended to leave the policy part.
I want to talk with this evening. Okay,
Right,
okay.
and
So,
then leave the projects to go.
okay, so that's the next,
Okay, thanks.
that's the next item on the, thanks, Chris.
Birthday party to go to.
Thanks, Chris.
That's the next item on the agenda is 18-388, approval of the fiscal year 2020 budget policy and community service grant application. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Stanton Gregor, seconded by Member Mucci. So any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have two motions I'd like to make on this.
Two amendments, or-
And I'll start with the first one.
Okay, one at a time, yes, would be good.
Yes. The first one I'd like to make is I'd like to see added to this is what I'm going to call a risk analysis or risk assessment. And what I mean by that is I would like to see, for the assembly to see, and I'll say a one-page, very simple outline of what both the manager and our finance director sees as the revenue stream coming in for the general fund for the next 2-3 years. Their best estimate, and I know in some cases it's just an absolute guess, but their best estimate of what our bottom line is going to be for revenue stream coming in versus what it is for this fiscal year. And the reason I say that is because that would make a difference of how I would see us deal with the next fiscal year's budget. Because if we were going down 5 or 10%, that's one thing. If we were going down 1% or adding 1%, I would approach it in a different direction. And that would also help, I think, frame the discussion later on in the budget, from my perspective.
So as a motion, you would like to add that to this
Yes, I
budget
would.
policy. Is there a second to that?
Sure.
Second, a motion been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Morrell to add this, how would you word it, Bob? How did you word it so the clerk can, do you have it written, summarized there, gals, what it is?
What I wrote down was risk analysis / assessment.
Yes.
Okay. So that's an amendment to add to this. Any other discussion on that? Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Bob, is this something that you're hoping to have done in the next several months?
Yes, I would hope we have it done for our discussions on the budget coming up. I'm not looking for something that's, elaborate. I'm looking for just a one-page basic assessment of what our revenue stream is going to be, and both the managers and the finance directors best guess of whether we're going to get it or not, risk associated with high, low, medium, however they want to do it.
Mr. Mayor,
Can you
I
interject?
could have something like this done by the next assembly meeting.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, with that being said, we're going to vote on the amendment that Mr. Lynn proposed to add this risk assessment in the budget policy, correct?
Yes.
Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
And Mr. Lynn, you had another amendment you
I
were?
do have a second one. The second motion I would like to make is to add for each of the enterprise funds what I'll call it a 5-year infrastructure plan or of renewal, replacement, what we need to do to keep our infrastructure and all our enterprise funds, up to a level of standard. I know we have it. I've seen it now for a couple of the areas, but I think it needs to be upgraded, and it would make a difference to me. And I'll leave it at that and see if I can get a second on it, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so can you summarize the motion? It's just to get a fiscal plan from the enterprise funds for
each enterprise fund,
for
yes,
5 years?
For a 5-year, it could be longer, but essentially listing all the projects that staff and folks see that we need to keep our infrastructure in some priority order of that standard.
Okay, second by Member Mucci, and that could probably go right in line with the capital project request. Yes. In a sense, I would imagine. So, Finance Director.
Now, I'd just like to say I'm going to need the enterprise funds department heads' help with this, so I can't guarantee it's going to be done by the next meeting. What I envision is perhaps creating a template for them to fill out, so every enterprise fund has a standard template, so you're not looking at different things depending on each enterprise fund, and then giving it to them to fill out for the next 5 years. Right.
Okay, so this is another amendment we're voting on to come up with a fiscal plan, basically, for the enterprise funds for 5 years. Do you have a comment?
May I, Mr. Mayor? Just as an example, we'll use Power and Light. We're in the middle of that analysis right now, and it's going to be at least a couple of months before that's completed. My guess is we'd find similar information from all of the enterprise funds that it'll take. It's not going to be something by the next weekend, or next meeting, is my point. So I don't want to give false information. That will take some time. That's a different animal than the first request.
Yes. Okay. Any other discussion on this second amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's actually, that would be probably just on the budget policy, correct, Member Lynn, that you were talking about? So there's 2 other items that we have to, we'll be voting on as well. One of them is the manager's addendum to the budget policy. And in that, there are reductions of not filling a police officer's position that's vacant now, and direction to the manager, if I'm reading this right, on department head merit increases, single payment or percentage of increase or nothing. So this is just a recommendation. I'm asking the manager this. If we vote for all this and approve it, are these things you plan on implementing? Like fulfilling or adding a EMT3 full-time employee, and that was part of this budget discussion items. But
if I may,
yes.
There's the budget policy document that outlines how the department heads will pull their budget together. This goes out, and this basically says it sets our fund policies, meaning how much money they should have in the bank, how we will use property development fund money, how we'll use, how we'll fund the school. All of those things are part of that budget policy document. So we kind of need that to be able to tell department heads, here's how you pull your budget together. Here's what the rules are. We've given you, this is the document that is very similar to ones you've seen in prior years. It doesn't have to be this way, meaning the assembly could come in and say something totally different and give us instruction so we know how to go put the budget together. What I did on the addendum is talk about things that, in some cases, I have already had conversations with department heads about implementing these things. And I really do need direction from the assembly. Are these things that you want us to pursue on? You can deal with them during the budget process clearly, and on each and every one of them, we'll make it very clear, is this in the budget you see or not? But using the reduction of operating hours for the library and Parks and Rec, I've already told those department heads, until told otherwise, to plan for that. I've already told Chief Kerr to plan for not filling that sergeant position. These are big decisions that impact quality of life as well as, operations. And the Assembly deserves the right to be able to weigh in and say yes or no. So, how you want to go about that? I can put them into the budget, and then when we get to that phase of the game, you take it back out or change it. We can talk about it tonight and go one by one through them. I'm leaving that up to the Assembly on what you feel is the best or you're the most comfortable with dealing with.
Okay, but one point or another, you'd like the Assembly, just like you said, to address all of these potential changes.
I would.
Okay, all right, just for clarification, Member Stanton Gregor and then Member Mucci.
I'll pass for now.
Okay, Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Me personally, I'd like to see a budget put together with these recommendations on there, just so that we can see what those departments look like with these changes that are suggested. That's why I've said the last couple of weeks or months that I'd like to see the discussion happen in January, February, and March. I mean, there's a real need for some of these, an EMT position or a firefighter position up at the fire hall. Just the conversation about reducing hours of the bailiff, or, I think the increase in the ambulance rates needs to happen. It's way below what it should be. I think we need to talk about the department head merit increases. I think we need to discuss what's going to happen if we eliminate the police sergeant, or we don't hire the police sergeant's position at the police department. What's that going to mean to the police department? And what's that going to mean to the police department's budget? And also the discussion about increasing the property tax rate to help cover the decline in revenues and increase costs. These are all things that I think, and we've heard from the community about, they want to reduce things in the community, and I think this is a good place to start. If we get a number from department heads that say, we can't do that, it's going to diminish the service that we provide to the community, that's going to help me make a decision at the end if it's a worthwhile reduction or addition. So, yeah, I'd like to see us start somewhere.
Member Stanton-Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, question for either the clerk or the manager. So these potential budget discussion items, if I vote yes, what does that mean in regards to simply put, the budget discussion items? It's late in the evening, so I want to make sure my head's on straight.
Okay, I'll try.
As concisely as possible to keep my brain on track.
I know. The budget policy document itself should be a separate vote from these
Absolutely.
items. Okay, so we'll get that on the table.
Yep.
These items here, yes, if you voted to tell Steve to make sure these all items are in the budget, then I'll move forward with that. I'll have individual costs for each of these. We'll build those into the budgets, and then you'll see it when you get to the budget process that we've included these items.
So it'd be seen as a vote telling you to do these things?
Mm-hmm. Correct. The other option is for the Assembly to do a work session or a special meeting and delve into this stuff later, too.
That's my question, because there's some pretty serious things in there in terms of quality of life. I would much rather allocate specific time for those as to picking these apart right now. We're from reduction of hours to increases in property taxes. Those are all things that impact our quality of life, and I think, in my humble opinion merit specific treatment. So I'd rather not touch those tonight.
Right. Member Lynn, so then we would need, that's why I asked when we started down this road if we were going to address all this, because in my mind this is a big change. Sorry, Member Lynn.
I agree with Member Stan Gregor, is that it needs to be a separate meeting, because I would not agree to all those items up front. I'd like to know what the costs and the implications are.
So I would imagine I'd entertain a motion to table this manager's addendum to the budget policy PDF until we can pick a time certain, or just table it, and that's just a thought, just so we can discuss it at a different time. I'm sorry, Member.
No, you're all good.
Member Morell.
Do we have to separate them out now, because we have a motion on the table to separate out the budget policy from this and then make a motion to have a work session, or that's for Debbie? What are we doing?
I am of the sense that we could make a motion to table the manager's addendum part of this out of our main motion to a time certain.
Yes, and
Or-
let's just postpone rather than
Yeah,
table.
postpone table, yes, that's right, correct. Member Steinberger.
Then I would move to postpone the manager's addendum to budget policy to a date to be, yet to be determined.
Second that.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Stanton Gregor, as we've all heard, and seconded by Member Borough to move the manager's addendum to the budget policy to a time to be determined. So we'll vote on that amendment to this discussion, to the motion we made now. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion on this, I guess, is where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we pass this, then is the intent then to have the city clerk send us a note finding when we are available in the next month or two so that we can have a work session?
Well, we could bring it up at the next meeting. This is just my thought, without knowing what's going to be on the agenda for the next two meetings, for first and second meeting in January, I would hope we'd have time to bring this up separately then, to either add it to the budget policy or
I'm comfortable with that.
Or modify it? I mean, that's just my thought. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Does that sound logical to the rest of the assembly?
It sounds reasonable, Mr. Mayor.
So now we're voting on the amendment to remove the manager's addendum to the budget policy to be addressed at a time to be determined, which I would hope will be,
The next meeting.
yeah, that would be nice if it's not like this. So anyway, clerk call the roll on that amendment to this.
Okay, Taylor?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, so we will discuss the manager's addendum proposals at a future time. That brings us to one other part of this, and that's just the community grant application, which is the community service grant application, which is pretty generic.
Mr. Mayor?
That hasn't changed much, has it, Jody?
No, not at, I don't believe I changed that at all. I did it months ago.
Okay, yeah. Member Mucci?
You know, I don't want to go back, but I'm just trying to sort out on this budget addendum thing. Would it be helpful to the assembly if we had some numbers put together to talk about this addendum so that when we do have a work session, we're not giving the manager direction to then get them, so that the next time we have a meeting, we would have these numbers in front of us so we could kind of have an informed conversation about what we're up to?
It looks like some of them could have a firm number on them, but that's for the manager to answer.
May I? How about for each of these items that are on the list, and by the way, these are taken, not just mine, they're from other people that have submitted stuff, and do, what's the fiscal impact on each and every one of these, and with some at least, things, the compensatory time for the fire EMS director. I mean, there's not a number there. I mean, I can come up with a number, throw that in there, and it gives the assembly a starting point for the discussion. And I can do that on each of these. At least gives you more information than you have today. I mean, does that work for everybody? Okay.
At least it's a starting point.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Sorry.
So thanks for that input, Member Mucci. So now we will be voting on the two items, the fiscal year 2020 budget policy PDF and the approval of the community service grant application form. Does that make sense? Okay, clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously, and we will address the manager's input on hopefully the first meeting in January. Next item on the agenda, C, 18-409, support for PIA's Community Development Block Grant Program application. I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved. Second.
Everybody was trying to get this done. The motion been made by Member Mucci and seconded by Member Stan Gregor. Or was it Member Walhooter that made the motion? Somebody did. Discussion. Clerk call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 18-409, support for PIA's Community Development Block Grant Program application. I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
We just did that one, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, is that the one I just did? Let's do it again.
It's all good, retire.
Okay, yeah, it's been a long meeting. Okay, next one, D, 18-410. Proposal to add the Borough Clerk's email address to the Assembly Group email. I'd entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Greger. Member Mucci, we've asked to have this on the agenda, so we will let him speak to this first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just over the last couple months, we've had emails sent to the Assembly that don't get to the city clerk, and the city clerk is kind of the central point for getting information out to us. And sometimes if she doesn't get it, we might not all get it. And I want to make sure that it goes through the city clerk to us so that she's not in the dark when it comes time to talking about letters that we've received from this person or that. So I think it's just a good way to make sure we're all getting the same piece of information, and Debbie should be involved in getting the information to us. Thank you.
Member Stanton Greger, then Member Norham.
And just as a clarifier for that, if a member of the community emails me, Kurt, or anyone about any one of us individually, that is not the case. It's only been, for the entire Assembly, things are vetted through or run through, you're included in those. Is this correct?
Correct. If this is approved, it would only be the Assembly Group email that would include my email. So if any community member wanted to email Member Stanton Greger directly, and only Member Stanton Greger, I would not see it.
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Member Norheim?
And then also, so for responding to things, because we don't want to respond all, on email, unselect the Assembly, so I don't send it to everybody, because I see that note on most emails. You would still receive my email if I unselected. So no, I could no longer just unselect the Assembly if we did this.
Correct. Only if you put me on as a copy to receive the reply.
Okay.
If you just reply directly to the person that sent it to you, that I would not see that.
Okay.
Any other comments, Member Lynn, or? No. I only have, I think it's a good idea. I have one concern, that if someone from the public sends something to the Assembly, do they intend for it to be CC'd to the clerk? I guess this is a policy this would set, that it wouldn't be CC'd, because they have the opportunity to CC the clerk in addition to the Assembly if they want to keep the information separate from the administration, from the legislative body. Just maybe I'm thinking of bigger apples and oranges, but anyway, Member Borough.
Can we just put that on the website or wherever you're going to get that? I mean, that's usually where it's at, right? That the borough clerk would be included in that, just so that
it could be stated if you.
Right. So that there wouldn't be that confusion.
Mm-hmm. Or we could also put a note that if you'd like the administration offices to know about your email, copy the borough clerk.
I mean, I'll probably vote for this, but that's the only apprehension I have about it. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda, unless I backtrack again, is item E, Alaska Airlines Essential Air Service Letter of Support. Excuse me, I'd entertain a motion to send this letter of support.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, motion's been made by Member Merle, seconded by somebody down, Member Norheim. Discussion. Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll send that letter again. Next item, F, 18-418. Excuse me, group sign-on letter to Governor Dunleavy regarding the Tulsqua Chief Mine in the Taku River. Entertain a motion to approve this letter. So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion. Yes, Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch, for bringing this forward. I'll definitely be voting for this.
Yeah, and it was during the discussion, you weren't here at the time, we asked about why the Unik and the Keene River weren't included. This is a separate issue. Yep. This is basically about this mine, so. Any other discussion? Seeing none, clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, we will send that letter. And thank you, Mr. Lynch, for bringing that forward. Communications. Communications, I just put this on there. U.S. Forest Service leadership change for the Alaska region. I don't know if everybody's read it, but basically it's announced David Schmidt is the Deputy Regional Forest in the National Northern Region, has been selected to serve the Regional Forest of the Alaska region. And also they go on to talk about Dave Zimmerman's moving to Juneau. I believe he was the district ranger here. I believe there's a stand-in for his position, and they plan on filling that and keeping that position here, is what I understand. So I just, that's on the website if anybody wants to read the letter in full. But I just thought I'd put that out there. Any other communications? Okay, assembly discussion items. One recognition I'd like to make is just want to thank the volunteer fire departments and EMS and the junior firefighters. I went to the Christmas party Sunday and had to sit at the table and sitting there by myself and my friend and myself, and then all of a sudden all the kids came in from the junior firefighters, and that was probably the most enjoyable table in the party to sit at, because it was nice to see the enthusiasm from some of those young people. So I appreciate the fire department doing this. Is there any other recognitions? Member Stanton Greger's got his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to recognize PIA for their Community Development Block Grant program that they're putting in. The application's approved. PIA will provide for the rehabilitation of at least 15 homes for low-income households in Petersburg, and will prioritize the most vulnerable members of the community, elders and small children. So thank you, PIA, for looking out for the most vulnerable. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Any other recognitions? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to publicly thank Roxy Lee and a group of supporters that are trying to purchase that bench that was part of the decolonization of Alaska. They still need about $10,000, and the donations can be made at the cost of the museum. It's a pretty spectacular bench, and the idea being that once they purchase it, it would be out in the lobby here for the public to take a look at, but it's sit on. It's pretty spectacular. So I just wanted to say thanks a lot for her efforts. It's pretty cool.
Okay, any other assembly members or staff have recognitions? Okay, that brings us to item B under assembly discussion items. Member Norheim wanted to touch on this topic, seasonal sales tax.
Yeah, it was something I picked up at AML, that apparently a lot of communities have a seasonal sales tax where it's higher in the summer, lower in the winter. That way you get a little boost in revenue for the city, or the borough, sorry, for the transients coming through, tourists, lodge people, and workers. And that way you could get, our revenue can go up without affecting the locals so much, because, yes, it's higher in the summer, but it's also going to be lower than normal in the winter. So it'll just be a wash for us. That was something I was thinking about. I thought people should know. And apparently it's a fairly common thing. And I'd never heard of that before. I had just assumed that it was always straight across.
Well, that's the way it has been now. I don't lower in the wintertime. I mean,
yeah, so I believe right now it's at 6%. So right. It would, I believe the state maximum allowed limit was 7.5, I read. So if we raised it to 7.5 in the summertime, and then you drop it down to, 5 or 4.5 or something like that, something that makes it balance out so it doesn't affect us any. Just something to think about.
Sounds like a pretty reasonable thought, but I don't know how you would balance it out to put the same amount of sales tax over the per year.
General, obviously you spend more money in certain areas in the summertime than you do in the wintertime, but.
Okay, well, is that all? Any other input, Member Mucci?
No, I think it's an idea worth exploring. Yeah. I did some checking on it a little bit today. Certainly we can do it. It'd have to go for a vote of the public, and the proceeds can be designated to certain funds. So if it's something that you wanted to pursue, we would just have to come up with some wording on the months that you'd like to see it in place where it's higher, and the months that it would come down to be lower. And then I would go to a vote of the public to see what they thought. But yeah, I think it's something worth looking into.
Can we designate sales tax for specific uses?
Some communities do.
I guess, okay.
But I would just like to note that currently our sales tax software cannot do what you want it to do. I'm hoping in the next year it will be able to. It could if, in a perfect world, everyone filed their sales tax at exactly the same time on time, but they don't. And so to have two different rates in the system would not work out currently, but I'm hoping that will change soon.
Yeah, just wanted your input since you're the one that would be dealing with it. Member Walhitter?
I just want to make a quick comment. Jody, didn't we designate 1 cent for the pool at one time? We're talking probably 50 years ago. And then that never went away. That was.
I'd have to check on that for you.
Yeah, I know that. That's what they did, is they raised this city sales tax 1 cent to pay for the old pool, not the new pool, but the old pool at one time. So, and then that never went away. So, anyway, so I know you can designate it, or at least you could back then.
What's that called? Yeah, there's a term for it. So, okay, and we decided to take the next item off the agenda, the designated assembly seats for election purposes. And so that brings us to item D, discussion joint work session to discuss economic development. Member Bucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I put this on the agenda just because it'd be nice to have a work session sometime in early February to talk about economic development in Petersburg and who is supposed to be doing what. We have kind of three entities. We have the Assembly, the PEDC Board, and the Chamber of Commerce. And to me, there's some confusion about who is actually out there looking for economic development in Petersburg. And I was hoping to have this work session in February just to get these three groups together and members of the public to kind of look at who's doing what and how they're doing it. And if there's not enough being done, how do we make more happen so that we make sure we have the infrastructure in place in case new businesses want to come to Petersburg. So that's why I have that on there. And hoping to have a work session in February sometime.
Okay, so did you mean, Member Bucci, just for my own clarification, Chamber, PDC, and the Borough?
Yes.
Not necessarily the Assembly, but the Borough administration?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Yeah, the Assembly should be involved as well because there's some differences of opinion about stuff.
We'll be making the decisions, yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda was discussion items was public meeting decorum, and I know the clerk gave us all a copy of Robert's Rules of Order pertaining to this. So I think without getting into too much discussion, if we just looked through this and read it and digested what it said, I don't think we'd have to go into any discussion unless somebody wants to expand on what I just said. And we could always bring it up at a future date. So that brings us to the best part of the meeting. So move. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all.
Do all a good night.
Do all a good night.
That wasn't as bad as I thought. I mean, as long.
That was long.
Not bad.
No.